Chapter 456. I know him. He was the one who built my airport, Jiang Hai said with a smile when he heard Mayor Wallace's introduction. Indeed, Jiang Hai knew this person called Hut Charles, because he was the one who built the airport. However, Jiang Hai built the airport on a plane. So in addition to a hangar, he only needed to flatten the land and build a runway. The amount of work wasn't big, but it was very troublesome. It took less than a week to build the airport, so naturally the cost wasn't much. Jiang Hai also met the head of the construction team. It was this Hut Charles. Yes, Mr. Jiang. Are you satisfied with the airport? Hut Charles smiled when he heard Jiang Hai's words. Hut Charles's current position was what Hua Xia called a contractor. But in the United States, contractors were not only responsible for the workers, but also the machines. They were also called construction companies. However, although they were called a company, they did not have many people or machines. A project as big as the Winthrop development was not something a small company like theirs could handle. Therefore, they had to work with many companies to do it. In the United States, there were many small companies like this. They could also take on some public or private projects. If it was in China, these companies were not qualified to take on the project. But in the United States, most of the projects were done by these small construction teams. Jiang Hai also heard of Hut Charles. He was an old resident of Winthrop. His parents were still in Winthrop, but he lived in Boston. It was easier to get a project there. This time Winthrop was built. He used his connections to get the construction rights of the town's commercial street. As for the other two companies, one was building roads and expanding the shooting range, and the other was building seaside villas and expanding the pier. Of course, don't think that just because he knew them, he could do anything. This was a private project, not a government project. The people in each department were either Wallace's confidants or Moses Adams' people. If these people found that their hands and feet were not clean, then it wouldn't be as simple as going to jail. They couldn't rub sand in their eyes. If they wanted to make money, then Jiang Hai would naturally let them make it. But if they didn't want to make money, then they would go to jail. Obviously, these three companies knew that Winthrop and Jiang Hai were not to be messed with. The quality of the project was quite good. Very good. Are you all right now? If not, come with me to my manor to have a look. Hearing Hut Charles's words, Jiang Hai nodded and said excitedly, it was indeed a good thing to solve this problem. Not now. I still have to discuss with Mayor Wallace about the merchants in the commercial street. The foundations of the 12 houses you want have already been laid. We still need to lay the foundations of the other merchants one by one, so we need to discuss it first. But I should be free in the afternoon. I'll go to your place to take a look then. Building a house in the United States was not a simple matter. In China, if you don't want to buy it, then you can leave. But in the United States, every house has been sold, so you have to build it according to the owner's wishes. If the owner wants to build a rectangular shape, then it will be a rectangular shape. If the owner wants to build a square shape, then it will be a square shape. If the owner wants to build a trapezoid, then it will be a trapezoid. If the owner wants to build a trapezoid, then it will be a trapezoid. Jiang Hai was quite satisfied with Hut Charles's seriousness. Okay, then in the afternoon, I will go to the town first. Originally, Jiang Hai was thinking of taking him directly to the manor, but now it seemed that he had something to do, so Jiang Hai didn't say much. In the afternoon, then so be it. He didn't care about the time. Besides, it was not easy for him to come to the town. It would be unreasonable if he didn't go to see Scheit Clive. More importantly, he still had a gift to give her. After saying something to Mayor Wallace Kirk, Jiang Hai got in the car and drove to Winthrop. Now the traffic in the town was really not very good. It was only from the commercial street to the town hall. Jiang Hai drove for half an hour. After parking the car, Jiang Hai walked into the town hall. But as soon as he walked in, his forehead began to sweat. It seemed that it was really busy here. All the employees in the town hall were running around at this time. Even when they were running, they were still making phone calls. This was because the town government did not ask these construction teams to provide labor and materials. The materials were provided by the construction teams themselves. What the construction sites lacked, what they needed, 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 what they needed. There was also an advantage to doing this, and that was that they were well aware of the type of steel bar. There was no chance of secretly changing it. They had to ensure that it was 100% sturdy, and there would not be any problems. With such a workload, they were naturally very busy. Apart from the construction team, there were also the residents of the town. There were also those who had temporarily moved away, housing issues, environmental issues, and so on. There were originally 8 workers in the town hall. Now 4 of them were in charge of several construction sites. Only 4 people were definitely too busy, so Mayor Wallace specially recruited 12 more people. Now there were 16 people here, but they were still very busy. Sheikh Clive was one of the leaders among these people. She was in charge of the construction of the seaside villa, so she was always busy. When Jiang Hai walked in, he saw that she was holding a stack of documents while talking on the phone. Her eyes were also looking at the screen, which made Jiang Hai feel a little distressed. After hesitating for a while, Jiang Hai called Sheikh Clive after hanging up the phone. "Hi, Sandy." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, many people in the town hall looked at Jiang Hai. When they looked at Sheikh Clive, there was a trace of ridicule in their eyes. The relationship between Jiang Hai and Sheikh Clive was not a secret in this small town. "Why are you here?" Sheikh Clive shyly looked at the gazes of the people around her, then ran over with the stack of documents, and said to Jiang Hai with a guilty conscience. She knew that she had been too busy recently, and her relationship with Jiang Hai seemed to have cooled a little. But she had no choice. She was a businesswoman, so she could not give up her job. Moreover, Mayor Wallace specially asked her to come here to help. "I came to see you. If you don't come to see me, then I can only come to see you." Hearing Sheikh Clive's words, Jiang Hai helplessly spread out his hands, then said to Sheikh Clive. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Sheikh Clive also chuckled. Obviously, she was very satisfied with Jiang Hai's words. "Don't talk nonsense. I'm also very busy here. If I'm not busy for a while, I'll probably be able to relax." Looking at Jiang Hai, Sheikh Clive patted him a little embarrassedly, then said with some expectation, "All right, it's almost noon. Let's go have lunch together." Hearing her words, Jiang Hai knew that she still had a chance with him, so he smiled. Although she suddenly became busy a while ago, which made Jiang Hai feel a little uncomfortable. In his heart, the best candidate to be his wife was still Sheikh Clive. "I can't help it. Sorry, I'm really too busy here. Wait a while, when the town is built, I'll invite you." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Sheikh Clive sighed. In fact, she really wanted to go, but the problem was that she couldn't go now. In the end, she sighed helplessly, knocked her head with a headache, and said with slight annoyance, "That's a pity. All right, I brought you a gift from Huaxia. I hope you like it." Hearing that he was rejected, Jiang Hai also sighed. It seemed that he had to wait for a while. But after saying that, Jiang Hai took out the Hutian jade ring he brought back from China, and handed it to Sheikh Clive. Sheikh Clive opened it, and saw that it was a ring. Her face immediately turned red. Everyone knew the meaning of a ring, but Sheikh Clive hesitated because she really hadn't thought about it. "I'll take it. I'll invite you to dinner later." She didn't wear it in front of Jiang Hai, which meant that she didn't give Jiang Hai a clear answer. At the same time, she didn't refuse, but put away the ring and said to Jiang Hai. Jiang Hai knew Sheikh Clive's hesitation, so he nodded. After hugging Sheikh Clive again, Jiang Hai left the town hall. When he walked out of the gate, he couldn't help but sigh. It seemed that there was still a lot of trouble ahead. However, he didn't say much. Sheikh Clive didn't reject him, but she also didn't accept him. This was already within his expectations. He still had to live, so he had to look forward. When she was at her busiest, she would give him an answer. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai sat back in the car and went to the Mexican restaurant near Winthrop, where Sheikh Clive took him to eat. After buying some food, Jiang Hai drove back to the manor. Not long after he arrived at the manor, Hurt Charles also came. He didn't rush to talk about the price, but he first took a helicopter with Jiang Hai and circled around the manor. Hurt Charles originally studied design when he was in university. After looking at Jiang Hai's territory and Jiang Hai's request, he had already outlined a river in his mind. After getting off the helicopter, he began to talk to Jiang Hai. It would be best if Jiang Hai's river went around the cattle farm and the forest in an S shape. The starting point would be at Jiang Hai's villa, and the estuary would be near the forest. The benefits of this way were that it wouldn't destroy the grassland. Secondly, because the forest was near the estuary, it could ensure that the soil there wouldn't be lost. Thirdly, it could take care of all of Jiang Hai's requests. Chapter 457. According to my design, this river will not be too wide. Most importantly, Mr. Jiang, you are not only doing this for fish, right? After they got off the helicopter, Jiang Hai brought Hurt to his mansion. Hurt drew a simple diagram in front of Jiang Hai. On the diagram, the river he designed for Jiang Hai was very interesting. It was An's shape that rotated 90 degrees to the left. The head of the shape was near Jiang Hai's mansion. After that, he drew an arc so that the river would go around Jiang Hai's residential area, but it would form a natural barrier in front of Jiang Hai. This way, the temperature would be very comfortable in the summer. At the same time, it would be easier to catch fish in the future. After that, the river would continue to go around the residential area. It would go around the vineyard and grassland until it reached the forest. Then it would change into a straight path and flow into the sea. That way, the empty space behind the vineyard could be used to store some of the animals that Jiang Hai wanted to raise. Jiang Hai did not only build this river for fish. He also needed fresh water for the pigs, chickens, and goats that he imported from China. In order to prevent these animals from making the water smelly, he could not put them at the source. If he put them near the forest, they would be eaten easily. After all, there was a family of mountain lions living there. Therefore, he could only put them at the back of the vineyard. The river would go through the pigsty, sheep pen, and chicken coop. It would be easier to take care of them. It would not be like Jiang Hai's pheasant coop and wyvern coop. It was very troublesome to take care of them once, and they would attract a lot of insects. So he could move them all there. Although designing the river this way would cost a lot of money, it would ensure that the grassland would be intact. This was what Jiang Hai wanted. Okay, then let's dig like this. When do we start? Jiang Hai looked at Hurt and said with certainty, "Sigh, Mr. Jiang, you are too impatient. Before we dig the river, we need to dig a well first. Also, we need to talk about the price." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Charles couldn't help but shake his head. This Jiang Hai is really rich and overbearing. Oh, go ahead. Hearing Hurt's price, Jiang Hai smiled awkwardly. He was indeed used to being rich. After that, Hurt told Jiang Hai about the price of the construction. Digging a well was actually just digging the source of the river. This cost had to be calculated separately from the cost of the river. This was because it was very troublesome to find water, dig a well, and reinforce it. This cost was actually not less than 1/3 of the cost of building the river. According to Charles Hart's price, for a 20-meter deep well, he would give Jiang Hai the first 3 meters for free. After 3 meters, he would charge him $320 for every meter. Jiang Hai knew that this price was very reasonable. It was even a little cheap. Other companies would even charge him $400 or even $500. Of course, if it was in Nevada or Arizona, $1,000 per meter would be a fair price. What a joke! If he wanted to dig a well in the desert, $1,000 per meter wouldn't be considered cheating. From 20 meters to 150, each meter would cost $470. According to Charles Hutt's calculations, Jiang Hai's river was about 7 kilometers long. Because there were a lot of bends in the middle, and because it was not very deep, it did not have a lot of water. It needed about 400 tons of water. Winthrop had a lot of underground water. When the well was about 13 or 14 meters deep, it would definitely produce water. However, the amount of water produced was not very accurate. It was very difficult for a well to produce more than 100 tons of water. Jiang Hai would need to dig 4 or 5 wells, or dig a deep well. This way, there would be enough water. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai did some calculations in his mind. If he wanted to drill a well with 5 holes, and a depth of 20 meters, the cost of drilling the well would be very cheap. around 20 to 30,000 yuan. The cost of reinforcing the well and storing the water would be around 50 to 60,000 yuan, which wasn't too expensive. Although it was twice as expensive as he thought. $30,000 and $60,000 did not make much of a difference to Jiang Hai. Therefore, he immediately decided to drill. As for the money for the river outside, according to Hut Charles, he would be responsible for digging the river and adding the river bank. He would also help Jiang Hai transport the sand from the beach. He did not need to pay for this. This did not include the electric wires and street lights. He would charge Jiang Hai $32,000 for the river. Later, Jiang Hai said that he wanted to build a few bridges in the middle of the river. He could not just not cross the river. He also wanted to plant trees on both sides of the river. In fact, this was also a sudden idea from Jiang Hai. In the past, when he ran, he always ran on the grassland. But now, he could run on the riverside. A round trip of 14 kilometers was also a warm-up. When they heard Jiang Hai's words, although Robbins and the others felt that it was unnecessary, Jiang Hai had done a lot of unnecessary things. As his subordinates, they did not need to say anything. Jiang Hai could do whatever he wanted. But after hearing Jiang Hai's words, Hut Charles also started to think about it. This was because for him, this was also a source of income. In the end, he decided to pay Jiang Hai for everything. He originally wanted to dig the river, street lights and trees from Jiang Hai's forest, but Jiang Hai did not agree. If he wanted to transport them from the Alabama mountains, he would pay Jiang Hai $61,000 per kilometer. This price was still within Jiang Hai's acceptable range. Although he did not want to sell tickets for a park, the most important thing was that he felt comfortable. The initial price for the river was $427,000. The problem of the estuary was solved by Hut Charles directly for Jiang Hai. At the same time, the price of digging the well was around $60,000, which was within Jiang Hai's acceptable range. Therefore, there was nothing to say. He signed the contract and started to work. The total value of the contract was less than $500,000, so there was no need to show it to Moses Adams. After Jiang Hai sent the contract to Penelope, Penelope finished reading it in a short time. She said that there was no problem. Jiang Hai signed his name with Hut Charles, and at the same time, transferred $100,000 to Jiang Hai. Once the money was in place, Hut Charles was ready to start. That night he went back to find people. The next day, Hut Charles's men arrived first. Digging a river was done carefully, and they didn't just start digging. First, they had to dig the hole of the well. After determining the location, they would dig the river. However, they didn't dig the soil at the hole of the well. Instead, they would dig the river at a distance. After the river was built, they would dig the hole of the spring and let the water flow out. This would form a small river. Jiang Hai didn't understand this, but he didn't mind watching the fun. Hut Charles took a few people to the left of Jiang Hai's villa and started to check. Winthrop had a lot of underground water, so it did not take long for them to confirm the location. Jiang Hai had never seen a well before, so when these people came, Jiang Hai took the initiative to go over and look. Seeing Jiang Hai come over, Hut Charles thought that he was afraid of not being able to get water, so he took the initiative to go over and explain. Mr. Jiang, don't worry, we have dug at least 400 wells, so we can definitely get water here. Let me explain. I think you know that inside the earth is the core, the liquid layer, and the crust we are standing on is actually a layer of hard rocks. There are many cracks in these rocks, and there is a lot of underground water. Winthrop has a lot of fresh water, so we can definitely get water here. Oh, hearing this, Jiang Hai could not help but smile awkwardly. He could not say that he was just here to watch. After choosing the location, Hut Charles did not care about Jiang Hai anymore. It was not a secret anyway, so he started to work on the machine with his colleagues. Drilling was not as simple as it seemed, just a drill was enough. In addition to the drilling machine, there was also a mud machine, a machine to mix the mud, and a machine to pump the mud. In addition, there was also a machine to put cement on the side. Once the water came up, they would have to start digging the well and solidify it with soil. Anyway, every profession had its own way of doing things. Jiang Hai looked at it for a long time, but he still did not understand it. However, the machine had already started to work. With a rumbling sound, the drill went into the ground. Winthrop had a lot of rivers and seas, so there was a lot of water. Not long after, mud appeared. But Hut Charles did not stop, he continued to drill. Although water began to come out, the amount of water that came out was small. It was not a problem for ordinary people, but it was difficult to make a river out of it. As more and more water came out, it meant that they were drilling in the right place. At the same time, the mud machine also started to work and moved the mud to the side. But as the water got deeper and deeper, Jiang Hai felt that the aura in his body suddenly moved. Then he saw that the water that came out of the drilling machine was faintly releasing water vapor. Hut Charles had seen normal water vapor before, but it was not possible for it to come out like this, and it seemed like it was coming out more and more. At this time, Hut Charles could not help but walk to the place where the mud was. He gently touched it with his hand, and a flash of shock appeared on his face. "It's hot. This is a hot spring." Hearing Hut Charles's words, Jiang Hai was also stunned. He immediately ran to the side and touched it with his hand. Sure enough, this was a hot spring. The water was hot, and the temperature was not low. What the hell, it really is a hot spring. Jiang Hai looked at the warm water that was still covered with mud. There was also a slight smell of sulfur. Jiang Hai could not help but be happy. On the other side, Hut Charles had already brought the drill out again. Looking at the water that was about 2 meters deep, Jiang Hai could see that the water was indeed hot. He used his thermometer to measure it. The temperature was as high as 42 degrees Celsius. As he drilled deeper, the water would definitely get hotter. It was indeed a hot spring, and it was also a natural one. Seeing this, Jiang Hai could not help but be happy. It seemed like his luck was not bad. Chapter 458. Do you want to continue? Hut Charles looked at Jiang Hai and asked. For 90% of the people, digging out a hot spring was something to be happy about. After all, Americans also wanted to soak in hot springs. However, there were some religious people who didn't like hot springs. Therefore, as the person digging the well, Hut Charles had to ask first. Of course, let's see how big this hot spring is, Jiang Hai said excitedly. Hearing what Jiang Hai said, Hut Charles also began to investigate how big this hot spring was. First, he dug the hot spring to a depth of 5 meters. After making sure the hot spring was not small, he continued to dig. Then he dug 4 wells nearby. 3 of them were about 3 meters deep, and hot springs popped out. It was not rare for construction teams to dig hot springs. They had already figured out the approximate location of this hot spring. Mr. Jiang, I have to admit that you are very lucky. This hot spring is definitely not going to be developed into a holiday village. But if you want to use it alone, you can do it even if you have 10 times more people. Charles said with an envious look on his face. After some investigation, Jiang Hai's hot spring area was about 3,000 square meters in size. 3,000 square meters was not very big. It was 50 meters horizontally and 60 meters vertically. It was not very big, but it was not a problem to connect a few water pipes or make a hot spring pool. Ah, this is a great deal. How about this? I will dig out this place and make an outdoor hot spring with rocks. Looking at the hot spring in front of him, Jiang Hai squinted his eyes. He couldn't help but think of some SW movie files in a hidden folder in his computer's D drive. There were a lot of movies in the hot spring. For example, a wife, a party, ahem. Jiang Hai didn't know when he became an experienced player. Logically speaking, he didn't seem to be holding back that much. When he was in Shanghai, he even had sex with Feng Yunshen and Ai Xiaoxi. Why did he have such dirty thoughts? That's not a problem. Is it the Japanese style? Drilling and expansion will cost about $50,000. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Hut Charles also looked at Jiang Hai with a knowing look and gestured 20,000 renminbi. No problem. Looking at his gesture, Jiang Hai also patted him. Naturally, there was no problem. These were all trivial matters. Although they had already agreed on the price, Charles did not immediately expand the hot spring. This was because he needed some other tools to build a bathhouse. Other than the buildings above ground, the underground was also very important. For example, If the mouth of the hot spring was opened, then the top of the mouth of the hot spring would naturally need to be covered with metal. The bottom of the mouth couldn't be made of sand, but stones or tiles. The depth could not exceed 1 meter. After all, they were going to soak in the hot spring, not swim in it. In addition to the buildings above ground and the stones, this required a lot of work. Therefore, they only surrounded the mouth of the hot spring with cement. Then, they went to dig the mouth of the well. Therefore, the mouth of the well had to be moved further away, but it was only a small distance, so Charles didn't ask Jiang Hai to pay extra. This time, water started to come out when they were 3 meters deep. At 10 meters there was a lot of water, but Jiang Hai still dug 20 meters deep. Although there was some moisture in the water was very cold. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was bone-chilling. The underground water couldn't be exposed to the sun all year round, so the water was very cold. Even Jiang Hai couldn't help but shiver after touching it for a long time. The water had to flow in the river for a while before the fish could be put in. Otherwise they would freeze to death. According to the location, they dug 5 wells in a row, and all of them had water. According to the estimation, the total flow of water in these 5 wells was about 430 tons. This had already fulfilled Jiang Hai's initial requirement for the river. First, they used cement to seal the mouth of the well. After preparing everything, Hut Charles left with his team. In the afternoon, along with a rumbling sound, a trenching machine appeared. The rumbling sound scared the cows in the manor a lot. But fortunately, Jiang Hai's cows had big hearts. Their bodies were strong, so they weren't scared. At first they were a little panicked, but later, they became obedient. This also made Robbins and the others relieved. If the cows didn't perform well, then they would have to drive them back to the cowshed. There were only so many cowboys, so if the cows were to riot, they wouldn't be able to catch them. According to the location, the digging machines began to operate. 1.5 meters deep wasn't too deep, so it didn't take long for them to dig it. Jiang Hai didn't throw away the soil that was dug out. He still needed it to build the river bank in the future. Moreover, even if he didn't need it, he could throw it in the pasture. Jiang Hai's soil could be said to be the best soil in the world. This muddy water was stained with Jiang Hai's blood, so it wasn't an exaggeration to say that it was the best in the world. This kind of treasure, how could he throw it away? So he let Hurt pile the soil on the other side. Under Hurt's command, the workers here were working hard to dig the river. On the other side, there was a group of people who had already started to build the hot spring. They first buried some pipes in the ground. These pipes were all water pipes. Jiang Hai wasn't the kind of person who would eat everything alone. Anyway, his hot spring water was endless. Instead of using it for himself, he might as well let everyone use it. But if there were a bunch of men bathing naked in the hot spring in front of his house, he wouldn't feel comfortable. So instead of this, it was better to directly send the pipes to their houses. Robbins and the others were quite happy about this. After all, it wasn't popular for Europeans and Americans to bathe in bathhouses. Being able to have a separate pipe in the house was excellent for them. So including Jiang Hai's manor, all the villas had a pipe. When the pipe was finished, it was already 2 days later. Then they started to expand the hot spring. Just like the one Jiang Hai requested, the main body was naturally reinforced concrete. Hurt didn't know where he got a pile of bamboo from, but he made a circle around the concrete wall. There was no concrete inside at all. The wall was meters high, and there was a layer of barbed wire on top of it. This was to prevent wild animals from entering. Inside the hot spring, Charles Hurt specially built a roof with bamboo. At the same time, he used cement and bamboo to separate the hot spring into a men's and women's baths. Of course, there was a place to change clothes outside the bathroom. Jiang Hai was very happy to see it, because it was really beautiful. At first, Charles wanted to make this place indoor, but Jiang Hai didn't agree. Making it indoor would be no different from taking a bath in a hot spring at home. It would be more interesting if it was close to nature. Zhao Hai didn't think much about it. After everything was built, Charles Hurt and the others started to dig the ground. After making the baths look like a bathing area, they brought in some stones and piled them up. After everything was ready, they started to dig the 4 hot springs. When the hot spring water gushed out, They had to use a pump to pump the water away. When there was only clear water left, they had to seal the mouth of the hot spring. After cleaning the baths, they had to put in clean water. Only then, the hot spring was finished. From discovering the hot spring to finishing construction, it took a whole week. Of course, most of the time was because Hurt spent most of his manpower on building the commercial street and Jianghai's river. After all, for Jianghai, although the hot spring was good, it was only a small path. The most important thing was the river. Digging the river was very fast, and the trenching machines could dig 1 kilometer in a day. After all, it was not deep. With several trenching machines working together, the speed was still very fast. Coupled with the soft soil on Jianghai's side, it was really not difficult to dig 1.5 meters. In 7 days, the river had been completely dug through. Now, only the estuary, and the estuary had not been dug. Reinforcing the embankment, and the like was much more difficult than digging the river. According to Charles Hurt, it would take another week for the river to be completed. Jianghai could also wait. Yesterday, he had made a phone call to China. His batch of fish, saplings, and other things had just set sail. It should take about a month for them to reach him. That's why he still has plenty of time. But even though the river was not in a hurry, it didn't mean that Jianghai's hot spring was not in a hurry. On the first day after the hot spring was completed, Jianghai did not try it. The next day he couldn't wait any longer. After dinner, he took his clothes and went to the hot spring. Because it was separate for men and women, Jianghai didn't need to wear anything. He directly walked into the hot spring with his butt naked. When he walked inside, Jianghai couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. This feeling was really comfortable. When he was in Bing City, he also liked to take a bath in the bathhouse. The feeling of soaking in such a big pool was the same as soaking in a bathtub at home. The water temperature of the hot spring is constant. After all of it was dug out, the temperature has been fixed at 43 degrees Celsius. It will be a little hot at first, but it is very comfortable to soak in it. Leaning on the big stone and looking at the moon that has risen in the distance, Jianghai can't help but let out a sigh of relief. It is very comfortable. At this time, if there is a TV, it would be even better. He is already considering whether to install a TV here. It must be very comfortable to soak in it while watching TV. Just as Jianghai was enjoying his bath, he suddenly heard the sound of water. Looking back, he found that there was no one else around him. If he didn't enter the men's bath, then he must have entered the women's bath. Chapter 459. Hearing the sound of water coming from the next door, Jianghai couldn't help but look at the opposite side vigilantly. He didn't know what was going on the opposite side, but although he couldn't see anything, it didn't prevent him from asking loudly, "Who is it?" Hearing Jianghai's words, the person on the other side couldn't help but be taken aback. Then a voice slowly came out. "It's me." Hearing this voice, Jianghai was relieved, but at the same time, he couldn't help but be a little puzzled, because the owner of this voice was no stranger to Jianghai. It was Bernice, but why did she come here in the dark? "You're really interesting. Didn't you tell us that if we want to soak in this hot spring, we have to bask in it for a few more days? Why did you come here to enjoy yourself tonight?" Maybe she knew that it was Jianghai on the opposite side. Bernice didn't care. She leaned against the wall over there, washing her body while asking Jianghai, "Ugh, it really should be basked in it for a few more days. But I'm also thinking about your safety, so I came in to try it first." Hearing Bernice's words, Jianghai couldn't help but be speechless. He couldn't say that he wanted to enjoy himself first, right? In fact, such a hot spring really should be basked in it for a few more days. After all, it had been underground before, and it was hard to say what bacteria there were underground. And most importantly, the house behind was newly built. It was inevitable for a newly built house to be dried for a while. Even if the materials used were good, it would still take a few days. But Jianghai seemed to be a little too anxious. "Tisk, I'll be a fool if I believe you." Hearing Jianghai's words, Bernice couldn't help but chuckle, then said. Hearing her words, Jianghai couldn't help but touch his nose a little awkwardly. Now he just wanted to change the topic. However, after thinking about it for a while, he suddenly remembered that although the two pools were separated, the water was actually one. The 4 hot springs were underground, and the top was made of cement. If you were to look at the floor plan now, the 4 hot springs were like 4 buckets. They were just above the pool, and water was pouring out. And on the wall, it was just separated in the middle, and the water on both sides was actually mixed together. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai couldn't help but move. Could this be considered the legendary mixed bath? Thinking of this, Jiang Hai couldn't help but become a little shameful. Looking at the existence emerging from the water surface, Jiang Hai's lover, right, couldn't help but stick to it. At the same time, Jiang Hai's mind began to fantasize about Bernice's appearance next door. For a while there was nothing to talk about. Jiang Hai, thank you. But before he could move, Bernice that, it's okay, but what are you thanking me for? As soon as he heard Bernice's words, Jiang Hai seemed to have been caught red-handed. He immediately sobered up, let go of his hand, and subconsciously agreed. But halfway through he asked with some doubts. Why is she thanking me for nothing? You're not doing something strange, are you? However, Jiang Hai's unstable voice seemed to have betrayed him. Bernice couldn't help but ask curiously after being stunned for a while. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai was even more embarrassed. No nonsense, am I that kind of person? Cough, you haven't said what you are thanking me for. As soon as he heard Bernice's words, Jiang Hai's face turned red all of a sudden. But this was not the time to admit it, so he could only bite the bullet and say, it shouldn't be, after all, you don't lack women. I'm talking about little Ya's matter. Hearing Jiang Hai's detailed explanation, Bernice also turned her head, looked at the bright moonlight in the sky, and said with a serious face, that's not a problem. As soon as he heard that it was about little Ya, Jiang Hai also breathed a sigh of relief, and said with a smile. It had been almost 10 days since Jiang Hai returned from the country. In these 10 days, although it was impossible for him to directly use spiritual energy to cure Xiaoya, it would be too eye-catching. But these days, he had already begun to treat Xiaoya. Every day, he would separate a trace of spiritual energy and enter Xiaoya's body to make her body better. There was no need to doubt the effect of aura. But what surprised Jiang Hai was that in these 10 days, little Ya's body had become quite good. Although she still looked weak, her physical fitness had improved quite significantly. Bernice was the clearest about this improvement, because in the past, little Ya's body couldn't be exposed to the sun, and no matter how much calcium she ate, she would still lack calcium. This was inevitable, so little Ya's body was very weak. There were almost no muscles on her body, and the development of her bones was not very good. But after 10 days, little Ya's body not only became taller, but also faintly showed muscle lines, which made Bernice very surprised. Her spirit was better, and her body was more robust. Even now, when she was cooking at night, she could hold a spoon with one hand, and her strength was at least twice as strong as before. But what made Jiang Hai most depressed was that, although her physical fitness was getting better and better, her hair and skin didn't have the slightest intention of changing back. It was still snow white, which made Jiang Hai a little confused. He knew that this wasn't because the amount of aura output wasn't large enough. Aura was aura. It entered bit by bit, repairing defects that shouldn't exist in the human body. It was also repairing. However, it wasn't much different from the entry of the entire aura. Now he couldn't cure it at all, and Jiang Hai couldn't cure it at all. He couldn't help but feel a little depressed. He thought that he might not be able to cure little Ya. So these days he really felt a little guilty, so he looked for little Ya to play every day. He accompanied her to watch TV, play games, and talk about recipes. At the same time, he also told her about the ingredients he imported from the country. This made little Ya very excited. For so many years, no one had accompanied her like this. When she was young, because of her illness, the children weren't willing to play with her. The adults in the children's families were also very disgusted with her. She didn't even go to school. When she was 7 years old, she didn't even know how to read. Later, the family's conditions were better, so they hired a tutor to teach her from the beginning. However, the people in the family were also very busy, so no one played with her. She was very sensible. Later, she found that learning cooking was very good, so she began to take the initiative to learn cooking skills. It could also be considered a kind of pastime. Until today, little Ye found for the first time that someone played with her was really a very happy thing. Jiang Hai really had nothing to do every day. For the past 10 days, he basically played with little Ye every day. The relationship between the two of them was rapidly warming up, and little Ye was also becoming more and more cheerful. Now, she even took the initiative to joke with Jiang Hai. And because of Jiang Hai, Delina and Marian also liked to play with her. Looking at her sister's happy appearance and her body that was getting better, although Bernice didn't say it, she was really grateful to Jiang Hai in her heart. Today, she saw Jiang Hai come out and followed him out. As a result, she found that Jiang Hai had sneaked into the hot spring. When she thought of the hot spring, she was also a little excited, so she went into the women's bathroom and talked to Jiang Hai. Whether this is a problem for you or not, in my opinion, little Ye is my only family in this world, so I still want to thank you. Listening to Jiang Hai's words, Bernice chuckled, and then said very seriously, "Hey, don't always say thank you. Action, action." Listening to Bernice's words of gratitude, Jiang Hai also smiled and joked. He was not short of money, fame, and women. These words were just a joke. "Okay, what do you want me to do? How about giving yourself to me? Come here now." Hearing what Jiang Hai said, Bernice also laughed, and then said heartily. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai, who was about to soften, straightened up again. "Ahem, what nonsense are you talking about? I'm talking about action. If you really want to thank me, then help me do something. Clean up the room or something." Looking at Bernice's words, Jiang Hai was really scared and said with an embarrassed face, "TCH, then give yourself to me. Okay, I'm done soaking. When you figure it out, come to my room." "It's not like you don't have the key to my room." When Bernice heard what Jiang Hai said, she couldn't help but snort, then said with a smile. As Bernice's voice got farther and farther, Jiang Hai listened to her words and couldn't help but feel a little depressed. But just as Jiang Hai was about to silently send Bernice away, suddenly there was a loud noise from the other side. Ouch! Bang pa! With Bernice's scream, the sound of a heavy object falling, and the sound of water sounded. Jiang Hai was also shocked, and instantly thought that Bernice might have fallen over there. Jiang Hai immediately stood up, and rushed to the shore in 2 steps. It was a bit difficult for the 3-meter-high wall to stop Jiang Hai. After taking 2 steps back, Jiang Hai's hand was already hanging on the wall in the middle. Then he used his arms to turn over. With this turnover, under the moonlight, he happened to see Bernice's whole body curled up in the water, and even her head didn't come out. Seeing this scene, Jiang Hai was also shocked. He turned over and entered the women's bathroom. He quickly ran to Bernice and pulled her out directly with both hands. But with this pull, Bernice's eyes also opened. She and Jiang Hai looked at each other, and the two were stunned in an instant. Bernice did fall just now, and her leg was hit by a stone next to her. At that time, because her leg was very painful, she buried her head in the water and rubbed her leg. She was going to wait for her leg to get better before going ashore. But she didn't expect that after Jiang Hai heard the sound, he turned over directly. Before she could stand up, he had already pulled her out of the water. Originally, one needed to wear a swimsuit to soak in the hot spring. But after all, the hot spring in Jiang Hai's place had just been set up, and there were not many people, so Jiang Hai and Bernice were naked at this time. Although it was dark, the moon tonight was particularly big. The two looked at each other like this, and they were in a deadlock here. No one knew what to say. Chapter 460. Do I look good? After about 3 awkward minutes, Bernice's voice came out first. Although she was smiling, Jiang Hai felt that her words were trembling. He did not know if it was because of shyness or anger. Looking at Bernice's pretty face, Jiang Hai knew that it was not right to answer whether it was good or not. This plot was too melodramatic. Jiang Hai had never been so melodramatic in his life. It made it seem like he did it on purpose. Indeed, no matter what, he took advantage of this matter. But this question was really not easy to answer. Fortunately, Jiang Hai's brain was not slow. He thought for a moment and said, I didn't see anything. A ruthless fire burned my home and took away my light. You are my eyes, showing me the changes of the 4 seasons. Thank you." She watched Jiang Hai slowly climb onto the shore with his bare buttocks. Then, he sang as he walked to the men's bathroom. Bernice, who was still a little confused, suddenly smiled. This Jiang Hai is really shameless. It was not until Jiang Hai's figure disappeared that Bernice remembered that her legs still hurt. She slowly climbed onto the shore of the bathtub. After rubbing it again, she took a towel to the locker room. When she came out after changing, she found that Jiang Hai had already left. This made her breathe a sigh of relief. But at the same time, she was also a little disappointed. This Jiang Hai was really dull. He had seen her naked, but he didn't know to wait for her. Didn't he know that she had hurt her leg? However, although she thought so in her heart, she could not ask others to help. So she limped back to the room. Lying on the bed, Bernice looked at her bruised leg and could not help but be speechless. At the same time, the scene just now unconsciously appeared in her mind. Although it was dark now, there were lights in the hot spring, and the moon was still very bright tonight. She was very sure that when she and Jiang Hai looked at each other, she saw Jiang Hai naked, and Jiang Hai saw her naked as well. Jiang Hai's strong body, streamlined waist, and something that was straight. Just thinking about it made Bernice's face turn red. When she was young and ignorant, she also secretly watched some Japanese and European romantic action idol dramas. In those movies, she was very sure that Asians were not as muscular as Europeans and Americans. However, when she saw Jiang Hai's today, she couldn't help but feel a little emotional. She didn't expect it to be so big. It was much bigger than the black men in the movies. At first glance, it looked very fierce. Bah, what nonsense are you thinking about? That thing isn't mine. Let's go to sleep. Suddenly, Bernice was stunned. What was she thinking about? She patted the blanket and cursed. Then, she turned her head and forced herself to sleep. But whether she could sleep or not, she wasn't sure. After Jiang Hai went back, he indeed recalled Bernice's figure. To be honest, because Bernice had not been nourished by Jiang Hai's spiritual energy, her figure was not particularly good. At least, it was not as good as Delina, Marian, and Aphrodite. Of course, it was not as good as Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunshan's. But that white and tender appearance. Sigh, as an experienced driver, Jiang Hai couldn't help but turn on the computer. Then, he drove Xiaobai and little Huang out of his room. His sinful little hand slowly clicked on a hidden folder. The next morning, after Jiang Hai woke up, he washed up as usual, then went for a run and came back for breakfast. But today, on the lawn outside the villa, there was no shadow of Bernice practicing martial arts. When she came down for breakfast in the morning, Delina and Marian, who had just woken up, were a little confused. On the other hand, Azalina looked at her and Jiang Hai with some ridicule. It seemed that something had happened between the two last night. Feeling Azalina's gaze, Jiang Hai did not react. After all, he did not do anything last night. But Bernice was different. Feeling Azalina's gaze, her face suddenly turned red. But she could not say this directly. She could only glare at Jiang Hai hatefully and continue eating breakfast. The atmosphere during breakfast was a little strange. But after breakfast, Jiang Hai went to Xiaoye's room again. While treating her, he also played with her. In the afternoon, he went to the cowshed to brush his little Xia's hair. He took it out for a walk, fed it some carrots, and went to the dock for a walk. When he came back, it was already time for dinner. Xiaoye had already prepared dinner. After eating a delicious meal, everyone could go to the hot spring to enjoy tonight. They took a beautiful bath together. Of course, they took separate baths. Then, everyone returned to the villa. Those who wanted to play, those who wanted to watch TV, those who wanted to play on the computer, those who wanted to sleep, went to sleep. This was Jiang Hai's day. It was really boring, but Jiang Hai was really happy. He ate well, drank well, played well, and lived well here. What was there to be unhappy about? And Xiaoye was also very happy. She was getting happier and happier. Sometimes a regular life would pass very quickly, especially when there was nothing to do. Happy time would pass very quickly. Just like working from Monday to Friday, it felt very slow. But when it came to Saturday and Sunday, it felt like there was not enough time. Before he did anything, 48 hours had already passed. He had to go to work again on Monday. And it was the same when he went to school. Why was it so hard to have a class of 40 minutes? And when it came to winter and summer vacation, more than a month would pass. The most terrible thing was to shake. Children grew up in a flash. Middle-aged people retired in a flash. Old people shook. Old people can't stand shaking anymore. Jiang Hai was now living a very happy life here. He had a peaceful attitude towards life, and he didn't have any ambitions. He was living a very happy life in this grassland. He also felt that time passed very quickly. After about 10 days, the river channel was completed. Jiang Hai's river channel was handed over to Hurt Charles, and it was very reliable. The entire river channel was 4 meters wide. The widest part was 4.5 meters, and the narrowest part was 3.5 meters. The depth of the river was 1.6 meters. Because there was still 10 centimeters of sand, the sand was all from Jiang Hai's beach. Some of it was from the sea, while some of it was from the beach. Jiang Hai's beach was very rich in sand. After all, there was a group of parrotfish raised by Jiang Hai. These parrotfish were specialized in producing sand. They only needed to pave the river channel, and they didn't sell it. Naturally, there was no problem. The two sides of the river were made of concrete, and they were about 30 centimeters higher than the other side of the river. On the river channel, there was a small bridge every 300 meters. They were all made of wood, but the inside was also made of reinforced concrete. According to Hurt Charles, these small bridges couldn't be destroyed even if there was a real flood. On the two sides of the river channel, there was a man-made track. It was like a 400-meter track in a normal university. It was made of rubber, but it felt good to walk on. It was good for running, but it was a bit hard to take care of. But Jiang Hai didn't want to throw garbage here, so it didn't matter. The road was about 2 meters wide. Every 10 meters there was a street lamp. Under the street lamp, there was a trash can and benches. Looking at this design, Jiang Hai couldn't help but laugh. Hurt Charles really wanted to make his place into a park. But it didn't matter. Anyway, Jiang Hai didn't need to pay extra. These were all gifts from Hurt Charles. On the other side of the path, there were rows of trees. They weren't valuable trees. Most of the trees in North America were red maples. Because the wood here wasn't valuable, at least not as valuable as in China. These trees were directly dug out from the Alabama mountains. It didn't cost too much. However, it brought a new screen and scenery to Jiang Hai's pasture. After all these things were done, Charles began to dig out the spring that had accumulated for a long time. The water from the 5 springs gushed out together, forming a torrent in an instant. Just as Jiang Hai was wondering if these guys would rush out of the river bank, Charles' heart's ability was also revealed. This stream of water actually followed the river's shape and flowed into the sea. After half an hour, the river gradually calmed down. Under the sunlight, the surface of the river was sparkling, and it was really beautiful. The next thing to do was to bask in the sun. The river water that had just emerged was still very cold. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was bone-chilling. When the temperature of the water reaches about 20 degrees Celsius, Jiang Hai will plant some water plants in it. Of course, the seeds of the water plants will be nourished by his aura. Once they are thrown into the river and take root, they will be the best food for the fish that will be introduced later. Although it was Jiang Hai's first time planting plants in the river, he had done it in the sea before. After 5 days of basking in the sun, Jiang Hai began to plant the water plants. The water plants quickly took root and grew at a speed visible to the naked eye. At the same time, the sand at the bottom of the river was stabilized. At the same time, the whole river was filled with vitality. With the aura and water plants in the river, many marine creatures were attracted to the river. Of course, most marine animals could not enter the river. However, some small shrimp, crabs, and the migratory salmon that Jiang Hai raised were quite interested in the river. At least when they matured, they would have a place to lay their eggs. Just like this, after another half a month, when everything was ready to continue, Jiang Hai received a call. The ship from China had arrived, and at the same time, Wang Yang's jade had arrived. His jade did not need to be as troublesome as the other species. He directly took a plane to Los Angeles, and then flew directly from Los Angeles to Boston. After receiving these 2 calls, Jiang Hai began to get busy. First, he asked Edouard Anderson to prepare the ship from China. At the same time, he asked Luo Binci and the rest to help take in the animals. Jiang Hai also called people who specialized in renovation. Everything was ready. Chapter 461. Hey boss, Jiang here. At the airport outside B City, Jiang Hai had just parked his car when he heard the voice of Wang Yang, Fatty Wang. Following the voice, he saw Fatty Wang standing in front of a large pile of materials wrapped in black cloth, waving his hand at Jiang Hai. Seeing him, Jiang Hai and others also drove over. Hey, you've been waiting for a long time. After getting out of his Rolls-Royce, Jiang Hai said to Wang Yang with a smile. No, these things have just been made. Wow, Rolls-Royce, this car is not cheap. Looking at the car parked by Jiang Hai, Wang Yang couldn't help but smile and say, men love cars very much. This is inevitable. But to be honest, it is the first time Wang Yang has seen someone like Jiang Hai, who bought a Rolls-Royce and drove it himself. Are all the materials here? After a few polite words with Wang Yang, Jiang Hai looked at the stone materials behind Wang Yang. Of course, there are a total of 267 kilograms of these materials, worth 400 million renminbi. I will bring them all here first. You can give me as much money as you can use. I will bring the rest back to China, and I can sell it again. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Fatty Wang also said with a smile, no need to bring them back, I want them all. It's only 400 million renminbi. Jiang Hai doesn't lack money. Moreover, if the quality of this jade is really good, he can use it to make things in the future. Whether it's to carry it with him, or to give it to others, it's a good thing. You're really rich and overbearing. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Wang Yang couldn't help but say with emotion, this Jiang Hai is really not an ordinary person. But if he can sell them all here, it will be a good thing for him. In the past month, he has run to Exine Province, Qing Province, Russia, Korea, from those places. With his own shameless courage and some previous relationships, he received 267 kilograms of jade materials. If Jiang Hai buys all these jade materials, he can earn almost 100 million renminbi. For him, this is not a good thing. Let's go. Looking at Fatty Wang, Jiang Hai waved his hand and directly motioned Luo Binci to start the assembly. Although these jade materials are very valuable, they are not too much, 267 kilograms. That is more than 500 jin. Fatty Wang neatly divided these jade materials into 5 pieces, each of which is 50 kilograms. Even before Luo Binci came to Jiang Hai, it was not a problem for them to carry 50 kilograms each. Now that they have eaten spiritual energy beef and spiritual energy fish, 50 kilograms? Is that still a problem? However, they also know that these things are very valuable, so they deliberately took care of them and put them in a specially driven F750 car. They wrapped it with a few layers of plastic wrap, a layer of foam board, and a cardboard box. Jiang Hai is quite concerned about these things. After putting the 6 pieces in the car, Jiang Hai let Wang Yang get in his car. Luo Binci came to Hermann Fels together with Andrew Christian in the F750. Everyone returned to Jiang Hai's manor. This is not the first time Wang Yang came to the United States. He bought a lot of tourmaline here. Therefore, he was quite familiar with the United States and the American countryside. However, after arriving at Jiang Hai's manor, he couldn't help but be a little surprised. This was because the place looked quite beautiful, quite good. Wow, I really didn't expect Boss Zhang's manor to be so big. It's much bigger than I imagined. A person who can casually take out 400 million yuan to buy jade is obviously not an ordinary person. Even if Jiang Hai is a cattle farmer, it is reasonable for him to have such a scale. Walking in, he can't help but say with some emotion, it's okay. Let's go in first. Hearing Fatty Wang's words, Jiang Hai also chuckled. He doesn't care about these compliments because he knows that his manor can't be judged by what it looks like on the surface. The things in his manor, whether it is beef or fish, are the best, and this is hard to change if you don't try it yourself. After all, Fatty Wang is a businessman. He will only stay at Jiang Hai's place for a day. After confirming that Jiang Hai has enough jade materials and receiving the balance, he will leave. so Jiang Hai doesn't care about him coming to taste the delicacies of his manor. When the car came back, the girls in Jiang Hai's villa, who were playing in the manor, naturally noticed them. After Jiang Hai got off the car, Wang Yang couldn't help but sigh with more emotion. At this time in his sight, Jiang Hai's manor is really beautiful. There is a huge main villa, and a series of small villas behind, an artificial river flowing in front of Jiang Hai's door, a grassland in the distance, and a further sea. At a glance, it really makes people feel small. The sweet air, and the beautiful girls in front of him. To be honest, if this is his home, he will not change it no matter how much money he is given. And this is the case that he hasn't eaten the food in Jiang Hai's manor. Hello. Seeing Fatty Wang get off the car, Daliana and others here take the initiative to greet him. Hello. Fatty Wang is very familiar with Daliana, Marian and Azalina. After all, he has seen them twice. However, it's his first time to see Bernice. Although she looks familiar, he really doesn't know her. After smiling at her, Fatty Wang was taken into the villa by Jiang Hai. In the villa, the most famous carpenter in Winthrop Town has been waiting here for a long time. Seeing Jiang Hai's group come back with jade materials, the 50-odd carpenter also smiled. After that, he went upstairs and entered Jiang Hai's room. After checking these jade materials, the old carpenter also told Jiang Hai what to do. Directly using these jade stones to make a bed and floor was definitely not enough. The floor couldn't be that thin. Moreover, these jade stones weren't too hard. If they were used as a floor, it would be very easy for it to break. Therefore, according to his opinion, the surface of the floor could be made of jade, and the bottom of the floor could be made of cork. In this way, the jade materials wouldn't be broken. As for the bed, Jiang Hai wanted to make it 4 meters by 2 meters. He liked big beds. Of course, such a big bed should be made of 4 waists. The bottom of the bed should be made of wood. Jade materials could be used to make the bed surface, bedside table, and the outer layer. At the same time, because the bed was too heavy, if it was pressed on the jade, it would be easy to break it. Therefore, the space under the bed should be made of wood. Jiang Hai didn't consider this when he bought these jade materials. But now that the old carpenter said it, Jiang Hai didn't have to refute. After all, there were specializations in this field. Jiang Hai followed the instructions of the old carpenter. After everything was settled, according to the old carpenter, it would take about a month. Jiang Hai wasn't in a hurry. He could use as much time as he wanted after signing the contract. Jiang Hai let Wang Yang stay in his house for the night. Naturally, when they were eating dinner, Wang Yang almost swallowed his tongue. The dinner was made by Xiaoya. This was something that both Xiaoya and Jiang Hai tacitly agreed on. Xiaoya was different from Bernice. She was still willing to do some housework and help out. This was because she could feel that she wasn't a waste. As for Bernice, if you asked her to do something, it would be difficult. According to her, if Jiang Hai felt that he had lost out, then he would give her his body to repay her. Asking her to do housework, that was impossible. Jiang Hai had top-notch ingredients. Coupled with Xiaoya's top-notch cooking skills, the taste of these dishes was really good. My God, Jiang Hai, I have to admit that your place is heaven. The environment is so good, and the food is so good. To be honest, I am a little tempted to go back and move my family here. Eating the delicious food in front of him until he couldn't eat anymore, Fatty Wang touched his stomach and said. After listening to his words, Jiang Hai also chuckled. His life can't be replicated. After all, Fatty Wang helped him go to so many places. Therefore, Jiang Hai was very attentive to tonight's dinner. In addition to the top-notch beef, he also specially got a lobster, abalone, sea cucumber. Xiaoya also put in a lot of effort to cook this table of food. Her culinary skills were no worse than the chefs of 5-star hotels. In addition, the ingredients were too good. After Fatty Wang took the first bite, he couldn't stop. Looking at his figure, it was obvious that this guy was a foodie. It would be strange if he didn't eat until he was full after eating such delicious food. Ah, delicious food, beautiful scenery, beautiful women, I really envy you. Looking at Jiang Hai's smile, Fatty Wang sighed. It could only be said that different people had different lives. After listening to his words, Jiang Hai also smiled. Others couldn't learn his life. That night, Jiang Hai accompanied Fatty Wang to have a good meal. After drinking a lot of beer, the two of them went back to their rooms to sleep. The next morning, Fatty Wang left. He had to go back to China to settle the bill. As for the money for the jade, after Jiang Hai checked the goods yesterday and confirmed that there was no problem, he had already transferred the balance to him. Jiang Hai wasn't the kind of person to drag other people's money. He left Jiang Hai's manor reluctantly, but the situation in Jiang Hai's manor had planted a seed in his heart. This made him think about Jiang Hai's manor after he went back. So after Winthrop was allowed to travel, he signed up for the first batch of people who came to visit. He had been to many villages in the United States, but Jiang Hai's manor was the first and only one that he couldn't forget. After Fatty Wang left, Jiang Hai wasn't as sad as when his other friends left. After all, Fatty Wang wasn't his friend. At most, the two of them had dealings in business. Moreover, after he left, Jiang Hai was busy with the second thing. That was the ship from China. It had arrived in New York and was heading to Winthrop. This time, there were a lot of things on the ship. In addition to the things he picked from the land and wanted to eat, there were a lot of valuable toys. Whether it was the Yangtze River grenadier fish, yellow croaker fish, or even Chinese bahaba fish, these were all treasures. Chapter 462. Wu. With a burst of thick smoke and the sun rising, a large ocean liner in the distance was slowly approaching Jiang Hai's port. As it got closer and closer, the liner also became bigger and clearer. Jiang Hai's dock was originally a deep-water gravity dock. At first, it was not known whether the original owner wanted to dock such a liner or just wanted to show off his wealth. The rich people in the United States did not know what low-key was. But now it saved Jiang Hai a lot of trouble. If it were not for this gravity dock, these large liners would not be able to come over at all. They might have to dock in Boston, and then Jiang Hai would have to fetch them himself. In that case, it would be troublesome, but it was okay now. They could dock directly at his dock, which saved a lot of trouble. As the ship docked under Ed Anderson's signal, the ship gradually leaned against the dock. Obviously, the other party did not expect Jiang Hai's dock to be so big. It may not be as big as Boston's, but it was not worse than an ordinary dock. The other party was very relieved to stop here. As the big ship docked at the dock, a group of people walked down from the ship. "Hello, may I ask who is Jiang Hai, Mr. Jiang?" The leader was a man who looked to be about 30 years old. He was a gentle man with a height of about 1.75 meters. He was fair and clean. He wore a pair of gold-rimmed glasses and looked like a refined scum. After getting off the boat, he looked around and said to Jiang Hai and the others who were walking towards him, "I am." Although he did not have a good impression of the other party, Jiang Hai still walked over. These were all his things. "Hello, Mr. Jiang, my name is Sun Chang. Sun Yuan is my father. This time, my father had something to do and could not deliver the things to you in person, so I came to deliver them." Seeing Jiang Hai come out, the man named Sun Chang was obviously a little surprised. Although he heard that Jiang Hai was young when he came, he did not expect Jiang Hai to be so young. It really surprised him. This person who seems to be about the same age as him has a net worth of hundreds of millions, and he is also in contact with the senior officials of the imperial court. Is he the legendary third generation or something? Oh, hello. Jiang Hai did not have the leisure to think about what he was thinking. But the third generation? He can't be famous. Not even for a generation, because he is not a party member at all. How can he be famous? Here is the list of your goods. After shaking hands with Jiang Hai, Sun Chang handed the list that had been in his hand. Jiang Hai also took the list and looked at it. Indeed, it was all the things he had bought. He handed the list to Ai Dehua, who would be responsible for unloading these things. This list was written in Chinese and English, so he was not afraid that Ai Dehua would not be able to understand it. Growing too fast might not be a good thing. The Yangtze swordfish also had 3 pieces of spiritual energy, but 3 pieces of spiritual energy was naturally different from 3 million. After the large yellow croakers were put into the sea, these fish quickly scattered. Some went to live in the distant coral area, and some went to the fishing and grazing area. According to Jiang Hai's estimation, the young yellow croakers had a higher chance of surviving in the coral area, but at least 1/3 of them would die in the fishing and grazing area. After all, there were already a lot of red croakers there. However, Jiang Hai didn't feel bad about this. Survival of the fittest was the law of nature. It was also the only way to turn these domesticated fish into wild fish. Finally, Jiang Hai didn't put the Yangtze swordfish directly into the sea. Right now, these young fish still needed to be put into the river. Therefore, he specially used a trailer to drag the young fish out and put them into the river. This time, Sun Chang and the others really took good care of them. 200,000 fish seedlings. After such a long time of tossing and turning, only a few thousand of them died. Unexpectedly, there were still more than 190,000 fish seedlings that survived. For Jiang Hai, this was an unexpected surprise. As for whether or not they would be eaten by the salmon and crabs in the river, it had nothing to do with Jiang Hai. As for the eel that Jiang Hai had been thinking about, he didn't put it in the river, because if he put it in the river, he wouldn't be able to catch it. He listened to Little Ye's words and prepared to plant rice in the rice field next year, so that it would be easy to catch and raise. When all the animals were put into the manor, Jiang Hai's heart thumped a few times for no reason. Then, Jiang Hai found that the spiritual energy in his body, which was originally not slow, actually increased again. It actually hasn't reached the upper limit. It seems that after reaching level 2, I took it for granted. Feeling that the absorption speed in his body had increased by almost 30%, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be a little speechless. At the same time, his heart was burning with passion. With these new species in his Hutian jade bed, perhaps it wouldn't take long for him to reach level 3. Chapter 463. The thickness of the skin has increased, and the ability to resist ultraviolet rays has also increased. Looking at Jiang Hai and Xiaoye in front of her, although Bernice's voice was still calm, it was not difficult to see from her violently shaking pupils that she was really surprised. Yeah, does that mean that I can go out and bask in the sun? Hearing her words, Xiaoye instantly jumped up and hugged Jiang Hai's neck, then asked Bernice with a nervous face. She completely ignored Jiang Hai's head. But to be honest, Jiang Hai didn't want to eat this kind of tofu either. You shouldn't be able to bask in the sun directly, but you can open the curtains in the morning and at sunset. Looking at her sister, Bernice thought for a moment and said seriously, "That's very good, thank you so much, Jiang Hai." Hearing that although she couldn't bask in the sun directly now, she could open the curtains, Xiaoye's face flashed with a trace of excitement. As long as she could see the sun, it was already a very unimaginable thing for her. Thinking of this, she couldn't help but turn her head and sincerely thank Jiang Hai. Then she kissed Jiang Hai's face. Fortunately, she kissed his face, otherwise Jiang Hai would be even more embarrassed. "It's okay, didn't we agree that I will treat your illness?" Feeling the warm and soft lips on his face, Jiang Hai also smiled. To be honest, Xiaoye becoming better was the thing he hoped to see the most. Since Jiang Hai came back, he had been treating Xiaoye's illness. Every day, he would transfer about 1/20th of a piece of aura to her. Then he would take the initiative to communicate with this aura and carry out the treatment in her body. But unfortunately before today, he didn't think that this aura would be of any use. Xiaoye's body was getting healthier and stronger, just like Aphrodite and the others. Their bodies were developing better and better, and the original fat was also gradually turning into muscles. Of course, it was the kind of streamlined A4 waist, long legs and waistline. These days, Xiaoye's body also gradually became visible. This was because she didn't do anything. If she also exercised, it might appear faster. But even so, after receiving a month of treatment, her physical fitness was quite good. But the problem was that her physical fitness was better, but her white elf-like appearance and hair didn't change at all. Originally, Jiang Hai and the others thought that the treatment didn't have any effect, until yesterday. A mosquito entered Xiaoye's room. When she was killing the mosquito, she accidentally opened the thick curtains and was exposed to the sunlight. This scene happened to be seen by Bernice, and she immediately pulled her back. But then she found that although Xiaoye's body was exposed to the sunlight, her body didn't seem to be affected. She did another checkup today, and found that although her skin was still white, it unknowingly became more resistant to ultraviolet rays, although she still couldn't directly expose herself to them. But some gentle sunlight could no longer have any effect on her body. You are really, really amazing. Looking at her excited sister, Bernice also pushed the tools in front of her to the side, then looked at Jiang Hai with a curious face. She didn't know how Jiang Hai treated her sister, nor did she know what medicine Jiang Hai used. But now that her sister can have such a transformation, to be honest, she was full of curiosity and excitement. Looking at Jiang Hai's smiling face, Bernice also smiled. Although she is very curious, she won't ask. This is also what she and Jiang Hai have agreed before. As long as Jiang Hai can cure her sister, nothing else matters. Thank you for the compliment. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also smiled. Originally, he thought that his treatment didn't have any effect, but now it seems that it only has no effect on the appearance. But it's understandable. His spiritual energy really has no effect on the appearance. Whether it's Feng Yunchen, Ai Xiaoxi, Afra, Delina, or Marian, the physical fitness of the women who receive Jiang Hai's spiritual energy will improve. This is inevitable. A one-time large infusion of spiritual energy can even repair all the sores on a woman's body. For example, Afra and the other girls' most important thing. But it doesn't change their appearance. Their original appearance will remain the same. Even if there are some white hairs, it won't change. In other words, Jiang Hai's spiritual energy can repair the human body, but it can't repair the recessive genes and the factors in the DNA. This is also the reason why Jiang Hai doubted whether his spiritual energy can cure Xiaoya. But now that it has an effect, he is more happy than anything. Looking at Xiaoya's appearance, Jiang Hai also touched her silver white hair. Feeling the temperature of Jiang Hai's big hand, Xiaoya's face couldn't help but blush. To be honest, this is the first time she was so close to a man. Even between her and her father, they were not so close. Indeed, children with this disease do look a little afraid to be close to others. At home, her parents are actually a little afraid of her. The only one who isn't afraid of her is her second elder sister, who is also her favorite relative. But now there are many people here who aren't afraid of her, including Jiang Hai, Delina, Marian, Azalina, Afra, Dana, Hilda, Becky, Sheila, Ohilia, Bridget, Janice, Uncle Robbins, Uncle Edward, Uncle Birkdahl, Uncle Philemon, and so on. But except for Jiang Hai, the others are all foreigners, so she is not very close to them. Unlike Jiang Hai, she really relies on Jiang Hai now. Not only because Jiang Hai cured her, but also because Jiang Hai is her first heterosexual friend. Is there a pure friendship between a man and a woman? Whether it's Jiang Hai or Xiaoya, it might not be realistic. Therefore, feeling Jiang Hai's big hand, Xiaoya's face blushed. Well, from now on, you're allowed to open the curtains before 10 o'clock in the morning, and after 4 o'clock in the evening. However, you still have to close the curtains for the 6 hours between 10 o'clock and 4 o'clock. Looking at the intimate appearance of the two people in front of her, Bernice's heart suddenly skipped a beat. She didn't know why, but looking at Jiang Hai and Xiaoya's appearance, she felt uncomfortable. Is it because of Jiang Hai or Xiaoya? She didn't know, but she still said subconsciously. Hearing her sister's words, Xiaoya and Jiang Hai also recovered from the atmosphere just now. Then Xiaoya nodded with a smile. By the way, sister, can I go to the hot spring now? Xiaoya suddenly asked while looking at Bernice. Yes, but only at night. Because there are a lot of substances in the hot spring. Xiaoya's skin's ability to withstand ultraviolet light was too poor, so Bernice always forbade her to go to the hot spring. However, after the test, they found that her skin already had a certain level of protection. If they still didn't allow her to go, she would probably rebel. Hearing her sister's words, Xiaoya also cheered happily. Finally, there was another outdoor activity. After ordering to go to the hot spring in the evening, Xiaoya was in a state of excitement. In the afternoon, she specially told Delina and Marian that they must wait for her when they go to the hot spring in the evening, because she can also go to the hot spring with them. Her excitement made her perform better than usual when she cooked in the evening, and the food she cooked was especially delicious. After eating dinner and cleaning up, Jiang Hai and the others also went to the hot spring in a mighty manner. Since Jiang Hai's hot spring was built, it has become a place where Jiang Hai and the others go to every day. The Americans didn't really care much about the hot springs. Moreover, Jiang Hai also gave each villa a water line to pass through. Therefore, Robbins and the others were very sensible. If they wanted to take a bath at night, they wouldn't come to this bathroom. Instead, they would take a bath at home, including their wives. Jiang Hai's bathroom was actually the place where Jiang Hai, Aphrodite, Delina, Marian, Azalina, and Bernice would take a bath. Every night, when they were tired, they would come here to soak and take a bath. Of course, Jiang Hai would also go with them. They would sit in the same pool and listen to the voices next to them. But today, with little Ye joining them, it felt a little different. Maybe because of Bernice's habit, when Delina and the others go to the hot spring, they will wear swimsuits, but after 2 days, they will not wear swimsuits but directly go in naked. If they are too embarrassed, they will wrap themselves in a bath towel. But Jiang Hai recently heard their conversation. It seems that they don't even wrap themselves in a bath towel. And tonight is also the same. When Jiang Hai slowly sat down in the pool, the sound of girls chattering could be heard from the other side. Wow, Delina, I didn't expect your upper body to be so big. Usually wearing loose clothes, I didn't notice it. Xiaoya, you are also not bad. Your skin is so tender that water can be squeezed out. Hey, Aphrodite, you still have the nerve to talk about me. Yours is the biggest among them. How can yours be so big? Let me tell you, Xiaoya, if you want it to be big, you have to rely on others. Aphrodite's is so big, mainly because she is already with Jiang Hai, So if you want it to be big, you have to rely on a man. You know. Really? But if you want to find Jiang Hai, won't you be a bit shy? Xiaoya, don't listen to them. These guys only know how to make fun of you, Listening to the sounds coming from next door, Jiang Hai couldn't help but feel his face and ears turn red. To be honest regarding this matter, Jiang Hai is quite willing to help. No, he is a man of principle. Chapter 464. Listening to the voices over there, to be honest, if it was just for Feng Yuexiong, then Jiang Hai would be very happy to help. However, as soon as this thought flashed through his mind, Jiang Hai unconsciously thought of the situation over there, in the misty water. A group of young and beautiful girls with red and white bodies were in the hot spring, ready to be picked. At the thought of this, Jiang Hai's hand unconsciously touched the thing that was already as hard as steel. However, after touching it a few times, he forced himself to stop because he remembered that the water in this pool was interconnected. If he had fun here and solved the problem, wouldn't it be troublesome if the water flowed over and made a few girls pregnant? He had recently seen some news about some men doing it in the swimming pool, and then causing other women to get pregnant. He didn't want to be a father without even enjoying it. Therefore, in order to drive away the tempting image in his mind, Jiang Hai had to shift his thoughts to other places. As he thought about it, he thought about the construction of his manor. Jiang Hai had been back for more than a month, and now it was officially the end of July. It was the hottest time of the year in the Northern Hemisphere. But now in his manor, everything was peaceful and peaceful. After he came back, he spent 20 days building the hot spring and the river. The river played a great role now. The cold underground water that emerged every day diluted a lot of the hot air. Not only people, but also cattle benefited a lot. At this time of the year, according to Luo Binsi and the others, it was difficult for people and cattle to endure. After all, if people were hot, they could find a place to escape the heat, but cattle couldn't. Cattle had to eat all the time. With such a big body, eating only grass in the sky was quite amazing. Therefore, cattle needed to eat outside all the time, so it was easy to get sunburned. In addition, the weather was hot, and there were many mosquitoes. Cattle were also prone to diseases, but since the river was built, the cattle's life had been much better. Every day, when it was the hottest time, these cows were willing to walk in the river. The river was very shallow, and Jiang Hai's cows were very strong. Although Angus cattle was a small breed, the water level of 1.5 meters was not enough to drown them. Swimming in the river not only dispelled the heat, but also drowned the mosquitoes on his body, making the smell of the cow lighter. On the other hand, the mosquitoes on the cow and the cow excrement were delicacies such as small fish, shrimps, and crabs in the river. Luo Binsi and the others didn't agree with Jiang Hai's decision to build the river. They felt that Jiang Hai was redundant. But now, they felt that Jiang Hai was really far-sighted. He actually thought of such a clever move. Regarding this, Jiang Hai couldn't help but chuckle. This was because he didn't think about this at all. But if there were benefits, it was always a happy thing. A month after he returned, the imperial court ship and Wang Yang's jade finally arrived. These days, the Hetian jade bed, floor, and reclining chair that Jiang Hai liked the most were finally ready. He slept on the Hetian jade every day, and sure enough the absorption speed increased again. Now Jiang Hai could absorb 24 pieces of spiritual energy every day. Of course, there was another reason. There were more types of creatures in the manor. When the creatures from the country entered the manor, Jiang Hai felt that the spiritual energy in his body increased again. This made Jiang Hai feel that the amount of spiritual energy in his body hadn't reached the upper limit yet. Then, he deliberately went to buy a batch of cows and a batch of salmon seedlings. But when these creatures entered the manor, Jiang Hai's spiritual energy didn't increase. This made Jiang Hai seem to understand something. The amount of spiritual energy in his body was one aspect. Another aspect was the types of animals and plants. This time, the things he got were basically Huaxia's specialties. Even if they weren't Huaxia's specialties, they weren't found in North America or the Atlantic Ocean. Moreover, the quantity wasn't small, which was why there was such an effect. This made Jiang Hai couldn't help but think. This spiritual energy seemed to be related to the collection of creatures from all over the world. But to be honest, if Jiang Hai still wanted to collect creatures like this, it might be a little troublesome. It was fine when he wasn't noticed. After all, he only collected some domestic creatures. The number wasn't a lot. He could still eat them himself. Of course, this referred to the creatures on the land. But if too many creatures were introduced, it would cause an ecological imbalance in North America. In the biological chain, the biggest problem was foreign species. Every creature had a natural enemy in the place where it lived, just like the rabbits in Australia. In other continents, rabbits had natural enemies. But when they first arrived in Australia, these rabbits didn't have natural enemies. So it became a rabbit disaster. They ate a lot of Australia's grasslands, leaving the main cattle and sheep without food. Recently, in order to eliminate these rabbits, Australia exhausted all means to reduce the number of rabbits from the initial 600 million to 100 million. It had to be said that the Australians were also very hardworking. So, if Jiang Hai wanted to introduce a large number of creatures, the American government would definitely jump out to stop him. What a joke! They didn't want North America to become the second Australia. After the topic was over, Jiang Hai returned to his manor. Although he couldn't introduce creatures on a large scale. And the most important thing was that Jiang Hai didn't have to bleed himself anymore. He could mobilize the aura in his body and inject it into the bodies of the creatures he came into contact with. Now he was about to evolve from a flood dragon to another level. If Jiang Hai guessed correctly, after the flood dragon, he should be a dragon. After becoming a dragon, what new abilities would Jiang Hai have? The increase of physical fitness was inevitable. In addition to this, would he have any other abilities? Like a dragon riding the clouds? Or something like making rain? Thinking about it, he really had some expectations. If he could really fly, then he had to be careful. If he was accidentally photographed, he might be captured and studied as an alien. But if he could fly, it would be very interesting. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. Thinking about it, the fire in his heart gradually subsided. By the time he reacted, there was no sound next door. It seemed that the girls had gone back. Jiang Hai didn't say much. He stood up directly, wiped his body, and walked back to the villa. Then he returned to his room, lay on the bed, touched the place where the scales were constantly growing, and gradually fell asleep. The next day, the weather wasn't very good. Jiang Hai's manor was next to the seaside, and those who lived by the seaside knew that the sea was actually quite reliable during spring, autumn, and winter. But during summer, The wind was very strong. The weather at the seaside was just like a woman's face. During July and August, the weather would change very quickly. Yesterday, the sun was still high in the sky, but in the early hours of the morning, the wind began to blow. When Jiang Hai got up in the morning, it was already raining outside, and the rain was not small. Jiang Hai, who couldn't go out to exercise, could only exercise at home. Fortunately, there was a gym in his house. As for Bernice, she also practiced in the room. Before Jiang Hai finished his exercise, Daliana ran over and told Jiang Hai, "Sandy is here." Chapter 465. Hi Jiang Hai. Seeing Jiang Hai walking downstairs, Shtuani Clive, who was sitting on the sofa, stood up. But when she saw Jiang Hai's naked upper body, she couldn't help but be speechless, and her face turned red. Hearing Daliana's words, Jiang Hai didn't say much. He stopped his exercise and walked out with a towel. When he ran outside, the sweat on his body would dry faster when the wind blew. But now he can't run at home. So in order to avoid getting wet, he ran with his upper body naked. Bernice was already used to this, so she didn't care. But now, Jiang Hai walked downstairs with a towel around his neck, which made Shtuani Clive a bit embarrassed. After all, this was the first time she saw Jiang Hai's upper body, and it was really strong, which made her a bit shy. "Hi Sandy, why are you here in such a rainy day? Is there anything urgent?" Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also smiled, walked to her and sat down. Regarding Shtuani Clive, Jiang Hai didn't know how he felt in his heart now. You can say that he likes her, but he really didn't have much desire. He just directly carried her to his bed, and then did something. You can say that he doesn't like her. But Jiang Hai likes the feeling of being with her very much. Between the two they are like a couple, but they are not a couple. Jiang Hai was really confused, and so was Shtuani Clive. During the period when Jiang Hai came back they met twice. The first time was when Jiang Hai went to the town hall to find her. The second time was less than a week ago, when the construction of Winthrop Town was finally completed. The road into the town was widened, and a large parking lot was added. Jiang Hai's row of seaside villas was also built. Jiang Hai specially went to take a look. The environment was quite good. The front yard of the villa was a neat lawn. Outside was a row of old trees, which were all dug from the periphery of the Alabama mountain range. The backyard was a private beach, and the decoration of the rooms was slightly different. There was an American country style, a high-end hotel style, a European style, a Gothic style, a Huaxia style, and an Indian style. The exterior was different, and the interior was also different. Of course, the style of the hotel was the most common. In the villa, there were all kinds of furniture and electrical appliances. There was even a separate oven, and the like for the other party to use as a stove. It could be said that it was very thoughtful. The bed sheets and cleaning of the rooms were taken care of every day. They were all middle-aged women in Winthrop Town who had nothing to do. The main person in charge was Philemon's wife, Mrs. Turner. Of course, in addition to Mrs. Turner, Charles's wife, Cece's wife, and Christian's wife all worked in town and received another salary. Anyway, it was close to home, so it was a good choice to find something for them to do. The same was true for the commercial street. They might build Cambridge or Chelsea, which had nothing to do with Jiang Hai and Winthrop. At most, Jiang Hai would use the money to invest and make money, that was all. Even if Winthrop was built, the 250 million yuan could not be used for construction. The construction team must be related to the government, and the quality would be monitored by the government. It was also possible that half of the construction was built, and the money would be transferred to other places when other places needed money, etc. If someone directly embezzled this money, no one would dare to do so. After all, this was a fund of hundreds of millions of dollars. But if it was just misappropriated or used to build other places, then no one would care. And a lot of the money would be eaten by the Boston government. But now Jiang Hai directly bypassed them and built the town. This made many people quite unhappy. These people were unhappy, so they naturally wanted to hinder Winthrop and Jiang Hai. The simplest way was to have no tourists, which was also the most fatal method. If they didn't advertise or arrange a tourist route for you, then no one would know about your town. In the United States, there were thousands of small towns like Winthrop. Who would care about you? Without tourists, you wouldn't be famous, and without fame, no one would come. This was a vicious cycle. It directly cut off Jiang Hai's source of income. 250 million yuan? It was all for nothing. It was precisely because of this that Mayor Wallace had been begging everyone in Boston these days, hoping that these people would be merciful. He even wanted to offer a part of the town hall's income to satisfy these people. Looking at Mayor Wallace's worried face, Sh20 Clive hesitated for 2 days, and today, she came to Jiang Hai. She felt that Jiang Hai might have a way. After all, he was a rich man, and rich people always had a lot of connections. Hearing Sh20 Clive's words, Jiang Hai smiled. Sometimes you can't blame others. Okay, I got it. Where is Mayor Wallace now? I'll talk to him. I'll help him solve the problem of tourists. Looking at Sh20 Clive in front of him, Jiang Hai said with a serious face. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Sh20 Clive was stunned. Jiang, do you know anyone in Boston? After being stunned for a moment, Sh20 Clive couldn't help but ask excitedly. No, I have the routes and tourists in my hands. Shaking his head, Jiang Hai smiled mysteriously. When Jiang Hai was in China, when he was helping the government to manage Du Feimin's oil sales, he told Minister Qin 6 routes. 3 of them were related to the Qi family, but Jiang Hai didn't care. The last 3 routes were related to him. The most important one was that Jiang Hai said that China would organize tourists to come to Winthrop. Originally, he only wanted to expand his source of income. Now the whole world knew that the richest people were Huaxia tourists. Wherever these people went, they would spend a lot of money to support the development and construction of the local tourism industry. Now most of the major tourist cities in the world relied on Huaxia tourists to support them. But Mayor Wallace and the others didn't know this. They thought that tourists were mainly from America or Europe. But how could those poor Americans and Europeans compare to the powerful Huaxia Antis group? So in the beginning, Jiang Hai didn't say anything. He just treated it as a way to expand the number of tourists. But he didn't expect that the normal route, in the eyes of Mayor Wallace, would be directly strangled by the people in Boston. Without publicity, it was certain that very few tourists from Europe and the United States would come here to play. Of course, Jiang Hai and the others could go to the TV station to buy some advertising time for publicity. But this was not a small expense. So for Mayor Wallace, this was a dead knot and very troublesome. But for Jiang Hai, it was very simple. Chapter 466. Hello, excuse me, is this the Massachusetts State Tourism Bureau? Knocking on the window in front of him. When the window opened, Jiang Hai bent his head and asked the middle-aged man in his 50s with a smile. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the middle-aged man who was reading the newspaper casually pointed inside and stopped talking. Thank you. Seeing him like this, Jiang Hai didn't care. Most Americans are actually relatively cold, and you can't say that his attitude is bad. People here are like this, so Jiang Hai didn't care. After thanking him, he tightened his clothes, took an umbrella, and walked in side by side with Sh20 Clive. Jiang, is there anything wrong? Walking inside, Sh20 Clive said with some worry. What can happen, don't worry. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai smiled. He wasn't worried about her. What was there to worry about? While talking, the two also walked into the building in front of them. Boston is a very old city, of course, corresponding to the history of the United States. When it was first built, it should be one of the largest cities in the United States. But that was many years ago. Now Boston has always been small, tight, and broken in this world. Anyone in the United States who has been to Boston knows that the roads here are very narrow, so the cars here are very congested. The roads here are also very dirty, and people from all walks of life can't tell. If you came here 30 or 40 years ago, the racial discrimination here was particularly serious. Not only was there discrimination against Asians, but blacks were also the most discriminated race. The whole of Boston was ruled by the Gray Gang, and almost all of the Gray Gang members were white. Of course, after so many years of reform, although the number of blacks in Boston is still not many, after all, this is the location of many universities in the United States. and the quality of personnel has gradually improved. But the hard environment is really bad. For example, the Massachusetts State Tourism Bureau, in front of Zhanghai at this time. It was really shabby. It was only a 3-story building, and it looked like it had been in existence for decades. There were no signs or signs outside. Even the door number was rusty. To be honest, who knew where this place was? If it wasn't for the GPS, Zhanghai wouldn't even know where this place was. When they entered the gate, there were 2 security guards sitting there lazily chatting. When they saw Zhanghai and SH-20 Clive coming in, their eyes lit up. Of course, this light was not directed at Zhanghai, but at SH-20 Clive. Sandy's looks were not bad, at least not worse than the average star. "Miss, may I know what brings you here?" Seeing SH-20 Clive and Zhanghai walking towards them, the 2 security guards immediately stood up. One of them revealed what he thought was an amiable smile, as he asked SH-20 Clive while baring his yellow teeth. "Excuse me, where is the conference room of the State Tourism Bureau?" Hearing this, SH-20 Clive smiled and said, "Oh, it's upstairs. Turn left, and you'll see the biggest room. I can take you there." Hearing SH-20 Clive's question, the security guard next to him immediately said happily. He didn't want his colleague to be the only one in the limelight. "That's not necessary." Looking at the 2 security guards, SH-20 Clive shook his head. Then he took Zhanghai's arm and walked upstairs with a smile. The 2 security guards couldn't help but twitch their lips. They didn't think they were worse than Zhanghai, that damn yellow man. "See, my charm is still very good." After walking to the 2nd floor, and not seeing the 2 security guards, SH-20 Clive smiled and said. Hearing his words, Zhanghai couldn't help but touch his nose. Seeing Zhanghai just smiled and didn't say anything, SH-20 Clive couldn't help but glare at this blockhead. This guy is really too much. It's almost 500 chapters, but he still hasn't decided who the heroine will be. This damn blockhead. Seeing that SH-20 Clive didn't say anything, Zhanghai couldn't help but follow her forward. Along the way, he also looked at the State Tourism Bureau. In the United States, the State Tourism Bureau was a separate existence from the government. The top one was the National Tourism Bureau, and each state had its own tourism bureau. They were not under the jurisdiction of the local government. In fact, the nature of this kind of tourism bureau was somewhat like a cultural or natural conservation organization, not a bureaucratic authority. Of course, the people who worked here were all civil servants. This was inevitable, but they didn't care much. This was because the tourism model in the United States was different from that in China. The tourism model in the United States was mainly the management model of the park system. In the United States, tourism was basically divided into 3 categories: natural resources, cultural resources, and entertainment resources. For these 3 types of resources, the United States government vigorously protected them and provided them for generations for scientific research, entertainment, and tourism. Each of the 3 types of national parks was subdivided into several categories. Below the national level, each state had its own state park. The most famous one was the Yellowstone Park Act passed in 1872, and the National Park Bureau was established in 1916. Since the establishment of the act, the National Park Bureau, which was the National Tourism Bureau, had nothing to do with the federal government, state, or municipal government. It was in existence independent of the political system. This was also why Boston didn't want to curry favor with Zhanghai. At least they didn't take the initiative to find trouble with him. But this tourism bureau dared to directly play with Zhanghai. Of course, it was not illegal to play with them like this. The tourism resources of each state and city were allocated by the local tourism bureau. This had nothing to do with others. Unless it was like what Shinty Clive had said, Zhanghai would spend money to advertise. The tourism bureau couldn't do anything about the people he attracted. But advertising in the United States was very expensive. At least, Zhanghai didn't have the intention to advertise. The 2 of them walked while thinking. Not long after, they arrived at the big meeting room at the end of the 2nd floor. They quietly opened the door, and the situation inside the room appeared in front of Zhanghai. At this moment, they saw Mayor Wallace standing in front of a table, looking at 7 people in front of him with anger and helplessness. These 7 people were sitting in front of a long table. They were either busy with their own things, or looking at Mayor Wallace with a mocking expression. In short, these people didn't seem to care about the old man in front of them. Kirk, we are old friends. You should go back. It's not impossible to advertise Winthrop, but we have to wait. The state's tourism resources are very rich. We have to develop the tourism industry at Harvard University and MIT first. Your town of Winthrop can wait for a few years. Maybe in a few years, there will be resources. At this moment, a Caucasian man in his 60s sitting in the middle raised his head and looked at Mayor Wallace with an official face. You can't do this. Our town has already completed the construction. Why don't you use the resources now? Why do you have to invest the resources after you finish the construction? Are you going to waste the resources now? Hearing this person's words, Mayor Wallace couldn't help but say angrily. He couldn't imagine how he would face Jiang Hai if this was really the case. This is your town's own business. We will naturally discuss the tourism resources. This has nothing to do with you. Hearing his words, a woman sitting there said with a slightly bitter tone, You are dereliction of duty. I will sue you in federal court. Hearing the other party's stubborn words, Mayor Wallace was really anxious. He pointed at these people and yelled loudly. These days, he had been here begging his grandpa and grandma. Unfortunately, these people really hated the construction of Winthrop. They didn't even see the slightest bit of profit. How could they use the resources in their hands? Not to mention the door, they didn't even have a window. However, this is the United States. Winthrop is finished and they can't tear it down. If this is Huaxia, what is there to say if they dare to build a tourism area without permission? They will directly seize it. Not to mention money. They won't leave anything for Jiang Hai and Mayor Wallace. But all crows are as black as the sky. Obviously, these Americans are not good people. It's up to you. The Tourism Development Project is decided by our state's Tourism Bureau. No one has the right to interfere. You can go and complain wherever you want. At this moment, the guy who originally had a mocking smile on his face also said with a mocking expression. Seeing this person, Shinty Clive next to Jiang Hai couldn't help but sigh. He's Mayor Kirk's brother. He's also the father of the guy you chased away last time. Looks like he's the one who's causing trouble for you this time. Seeing Jiang Hai looking over, Shinty Clive bit her lips and said softly to Jiang Hai. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also smiled and nodded. Then, without saying anything, he directly opened the door and walked in. When the door was opened, the people in the room were shocked. When they saw Jiang Hai, Wallace's face showed a trace of helplessness. The 7 people on the other side were a little confused. Only the person who spoke just now had hatred in his eyes. After all, Jiang Hai beat up his son. However, he knew that Jiang Hai was a rich man. If he went to court with Jiang Hai, he would definitely lose. Even if he won, it would be useless because his son didn't even have minor injuries. At most, he would be sentenced to community service. However, if Jiang Hai came back to his senses, it would be troublesome. Therefore, after his son was beaten up, he didn't dare to say anything. However, he deeply remembered Jiang Hai's face. Now that he saw Jiang Hai walking over, his face was really gloomy and scary. Who are you? What are you doing here? Security, who let them in? He immediately slammed the table and shouted. That has nothing to do with you. Just like your resources have nothing to do with us. We will do whatever we want. If it breaks the law, then we will follow the law. We will also pay the taxes that should be paid. Indeed, the Tourism Bureau is a separate unit. But I don't need your resources. What can you do? But before the woman finished speaking, Jiang Hai had already interrupted her. This woman was using a chicken feather as a token of authority. Jiang Hai was not so kind as to listen to her nonsense. Hearing Jiang Hai's words again, the people here looked at each other. It seemed that they had no other choice. Indeed, what could they do? Without the advantage of resources, who would hang a tourism bureau like them? Belonging to a tourism bureau alone would indeed prevent others from coming to take advantage of them. But similarly, if others did not hang them, they had no way to ally with others. Moreover, Winthrop was a town, and this town had its own independent mechanism. Whether it was the town hall, the judicial court, or the police station, they had them all. They did not need the states, so what could they do? Let's go, I've already contacted them. There should be news in a few days. Tell me, why didn't you discuss such an important matter with me? What's the use of telling these guys? After patting Mayor Wallace's shoulder, Jiang Hai glanced at the people behind him with disdain. They really thought that they were some big shot. Just an old and broken tourism bureau dared to pick a fight here. Did Jiang Hai care? But, hearing Jiang Hai's words, Mayor Wallace was still a little hesitant. After all, he was old. His thinking was also a little old. He believed that the main guests of the tourism bureau should be domestic guests. For example, the guests from Huaxia. It was so far away, would they come? Thinking of this, he himself felt that it was a little unreliable. However, Jiang Hai smiled. No one knew better than him what kind of scene the people in the country would have when they saw the things here. Not to mention the scenery. There was no need to introduce them. Just the price of the ginseng, clothes, and other things were enough to make the people in the country go crazy. How much did it cost to eat lobster in the country? This was known without an introduction. How much was lobster here? How many foodies could be attracted by this alone? How much was ginseng in China? How much was maple syrup? Were you sure you bought it for real? How much was it in China? How much was it here? Was there any comparison? Was there a shooting range in China that could shoot M16A3 bullets? It was difficult to understand how attractive the United States was to the average rich person in China, without staying in China for so many years. Therefore, Jiang Hai was not worried at all. Looking at Jiang Hai's appearance, Wallace also knew that he probably had no way to obtain domestic resources. Then, he could only try his best and believe in Jiang Hai for the time being. The three of them walked out of the Massachusetts Tourism Bureau under Jiang Hai's gaze. However, after entering Jiang Hai's car, Mayor Wallace was still frowning. Jiang Hai also knew that it was useless to say anything now. Rather than this, it was better to let the domestic group send it over as soon as possible. This was the most important thing. After starting the engine, Jiang Hai first sent Mayor Wallace home, then sent Shinty Clive back. Jiang, this time, we really have to trouble you. Before getting out of the car, Shinty Clive purposely paused for a moment, then gently bit her lips and said to Jiang Hai. Shinty Clive's words were not because of what Mayor Wallace said. She and Mayor Wallace were not related in any way. At most, he helped her a little. She said this on behalf of the entire town. If the tourism really started, the people who would benefit the most would naturally be the town's residents. And of course, Jiang Hai. Don't worry, when have I ever let you down? Looking at her appearance, Jiang Hai also laughed. Is this a problem? I believe in you. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Shinty Clive nodded seriously, then got out of the car with a smile. She ran into the villa next door and waved at Jiang Hai at the door. Seeing her like this, Jiang Hai also smiled. After watching her go home, he started the engine and drove back home. When he reached home, he found Minister Qin's phone number. Although he sounded arrogant just now, Minister Qin had called him. Although he was arrogant, in fact, he was not particularly confident in his heart, so it was better to ask first. Fortunately, Minister Qin had no intention of getting rid of Jiang Hai after he had outlived his usefulness. He had already explained on the phone that he had already helped Jiang Hai contact. It was led by a national travel agency, and the first batch of guests should be leaving soon. After hearing his words, Jiang Hai specially called the person in charge. After learning that it was Jiang Hai, he was very polite and explained the situation to Jiang Hai at the same time. In fact, when Jiang Hai left the country, Minister Qin had already given the order. But after all, Jiang Hai's place wasn't a famous scenic spot, and most importantly, there were no photos. They said that they could shoot guns and go out to sea, but there were no pictures. Not many people believed it, so it took a long time to recruit people. But even so, this travel agency was quite powerful. In more than a month, they helped Jiang Hai gather the first batch of people, a total of 47 people. Among them, 3 were individual customers, and the leaders of a national enterprise were all on vacation. It was not good to go to a place that was too eye-catching, so they decided to go to Jiang Hai's place. Jiang Hai and the others certainly wouldn't kill them, but they also couldn't make a scene. If they really wanted to make a scene, then Jiang Hai and the others weren't vegetarians. While Jiang Hai was comforting Delia, his cell phone rang. He picked up the phone and found that it was a call from the tour group leader. After he picked it up, a baritone voice sounded on the other side of the phone. After confirming the location of Jiang Hai and the others, he saw a group of people walking out of Guarati Airport in front of him while taking photos. These people all had Huaxia faces. They walked in 3 groups. Walking in front was a group of people in formal clothes. These people were men and women, old and young, but all of them looked very decent. While walking, they also looked around and talked and laughed. It seemed that these people were some of the senior executives of the state-owned enterprise mentioned on the phone. In addition to this group of people, there were 2 groups behind. One of them was a group of 2 families. It could be seen that it was a pair of parents with a child, a young couple, and a pair of parents. It could be seen that these 2 families had a good conversation on the plane, and their relationship was quite harmonious. At the end of the line was the last group of individual customers. There were 2 young people who looked like they were on a honeymoon trip. They were wearing matching outfits and diamond rings. They were taking selfies as they walked. At the front of these people there were 3 people, 2 men and 1 woman. The man should be the leader who talked to Jiang Hai on the phone. The man and the woman had been organizing these people not to get lost and not to fall behind. After all, this was the United States. If they got lost, it would be troublesome. Seeing Jiang Hai waving, the group of 50 people quickly walked over. The middle-aged leader shook hands with Jiang Hai first. "Hello, you must be Mr. Jiang. My name is Wu Shan, and I'm the tour guide this time." "Hello, I'm Jiang Hai. I'm from Winthrop, a town." "Haha, this is Delia George. She's also the main tour guide, and the person in charge of your trip in Winthrop. If you have any problems these days, you can find her at any time." After shaking hands with the man named Wu Shan, Jiang Hai also introduced Delia George. After all, she was the main character. After the 2 of them met, they briefly talked about the itinerary for this trip. This tour was a short-term tour. They would only stay in the United States for 7 days. Of course, these 7 days included the day they flew over and the day they flew back. In other words, they would only stay in Winthrop for a total of 5 days. Of course, if they didn't want to go, it would be a different story. However, a tour group like this was purely for fun, not for shopping or sightseeing, so there was a lot of time to arrange. After a simple communication and confirming that there were no problems, the 2 tour guides from China began to let the group get on the bus that Jiang Hai had already arranged. The bus behind Jiang Hai was specially bought by the Winthrop Town Hall to pick up these tourists. The 4-star Mercedes-Benz was luxurious. To be honest, everyone in the tour group was quite satisfied when they got on the bus. In China, the price of the bus alone, not including the tax, license plate, insurance and so on, was close to 3 million yuan. Whether it was the space or the comfort, it was much better than that of ordinary guests. Of course, it wouldn't be so expensive in the United States. This Mercedes-Benz bus was worth about $300,000, which meant that it could be bought with $1.8 million, or with an interest-free loan for 5 years. It really wasn't worth much. After everyone got on the bus, Jiang Hai got on his shield and prepared to lead the bus back. He didn't want to squeeze into the bus with these people. The tour leader, named Wu Shan, also got on his car. He wanted to confirm what they were going to do these days, so that he could discuss it with these people when they arrived. Hello, my name is Delia George. I'm your tour guide this time. You can call me Miss George. If there's anything you need, you can tell me. I'll try my best to satisfy your needs." As the bus started, Delia George took a deep breath and glanced at the driver hired by Winthrop. She plucked up her courage and said to the people in front of her, who looked a little like Jiang Hai. Young people nowadays more or less knew some English, and the people in the state-owned enterprise had their own interpreters. At the very least, the people in the car understood what she said. But then, A middle-aged man in his 40s or 50s sitting in the front pointed out the window and asked Delia George, "What's going on?" "Hey, young lady, isn't the young man standing outside one of your people? Why did he drive that car away? What kind of car is that? It looks good." The man pointed at Jiang Hai's shield and asked excitedly. However, Delia didn't understand his words because he spoke in Huaxia language. At this time, the two tour guides who got on the bus with her immediately translated for her. "Oh, that's Jiang Hai, Mr. Jiang. He's not our receptionist because he's a very important person in our country. Besides, he was the one who contacted you this time. So he came to take a look and help me. As for the car he drove, it's called the Keppel Shield. It's also a very good car in the United States. It can even defend against rocket launchers. Of course, we don't have such things here. But rich people like this car very much to show their character." After hearing the translation, Delia smiled and explained. Some people who liked cars checked the car's name after confirming it. "Wow, this car is really beautiful. It's a nouveau riche gold. If it's good, I'll get one when I return to China." Hearing the other tour guide's translation, the middle-aged man's eyes lit up, and he said excitedly, "You can't buy it, old Lu. If you buy this car, you won't be far from the bottom." Hearing his words, the other middle-aged man sitting next to him couldn't help but laugh. "What? Is this car expensive? It's not a brand we know." Hearing the words of the person next to him, old Lu couldn't help but be stunned. His official position in a state-owned enterprise is the director of a department. No one knows how much money he has, but it's not to the extent that he can't afford a car. Hearing his colleague's words, he couldn't help but be a little puzzled. "That car is not very famous in our country, but I know that car is worth 20 million. Old Lu may not be unable to afford 20 million, but does he dare to spend 20 million to buy a car? It's estimated that no one in the country who is an official or a state-owned enterprise dares to drive such a car." Hearing this price, old Lu couldn't help but curl his lips. 20 million, forget it. Wow, this car is so expensive. After hearing this man's words, the others in the car looked at Jiang Hai's shield. They didn't care much at first. After all, Jiang Hai's car doesn't look very good. Although it's a nouveau riche gold, it's a little different from the luxury cars that ordinary people know. Now that they heard 20 million, they were really shocked. Chapter 469. I didn't expect that young man to be so rich. A woman in her 30s in this tour group said excitedly, as she looked at the figure of War Shield, who had already driven out of the airport and was leading the bus to Winthrop. "Sai, it's just a car. I heard that these Huaxia people in the United States are very similar to Americans. They usually don't save money, and this money might be his or his father's." Hearing the woman's words, a man who looked about the same age as the woman beside the woman couldn't help but feel jealous. It can be seen that this woman is really quite attractive. Although she is in her 30s, she has taken good care of herself. She looks very beautiful and has a good figure. In addition, they are all wearing the same clothes. The feeling of being an office lady is really attractive. That's not it. Jiang Fei is the richest man in our country. I heard that his parents have passed away. He came to our country a year ago and spent 280 million yuan to buy our largest fishing farm and ranch. I heard that he earns hundreds of millions of yuan a year. Hearing the words of these two people, Delia also asked the tour guide next to her. After learning that they were talking about Jiang Hai, she smiled and explained. Now in Winthrop, it's not an exaggeration to say that Jiang Hai is the dream lover of these women. His character is good, his figure is not bad, and most importantly, he is rich, very rich, very rich. If they can really do something with such a man, then it's definitely worth it. If they can also become the first wife, TSK. It's said that men become bad when they are rich. They have never considered being Jiang Hai's one and only, but it's not bad to be the second or third wife. Hearing what Delia said, the tour guides here were stunned, especially the female tour guide, whose eyes couldn't help but shine. After she translated Delia's words, the atmosphere in the bus changed a little. The woman's eyes lit up. Of course, the eyes of the woman who was taken were filled with curiosity at most, such as the couple who came here for a vacation. As for the man's eyes, there was something inexplicable, but jealousy was definitely there. Jiang Hai's manor is very big. Jiang Hai's villa is very beautiful. His cows are very profitable. He also has a fishing farm and a beach by the sea. He also has a large yacht and 2 airplanes. That's right. However, Delia didn't seem to feel these jealousy. She still smiled and introduced Jiang Hai, as if Jiang Hai was her man. Listening to these introductions, the eyes of the women became brighter and brighter, and the men couldn't help but feel a little discouraged. At this time, Jiang Hai didn't know that Delia had already revealed almost all of his secrets. He was still in the car, discussing with Wu Shan, the leader of this expedition, what kind of places they could play and what kind of things they could charge for. If Winthrop was really similar to what Jiang Hai said, he would no longer consider following Jiang Hai's words. As long as it was similar, he was ready to send out the second tour group. But when he arrived at Winthrop, he realized that Jiang Hai was actually exaggerating. Winthrop was really a good town. After sitting in the car for more than 3 hours, the 2 cars stopped in the parking lot one after another. Wu Shan also got out of the car and looked around. In his eyes, Winthrop was like a small town in a European fairy tale world. There was green grass everywhere, an excellent environment with big trees, and elegant and boorish European-style buildings. The path was paved with bluestones, the sea breeze blew, and the slightly fishy smell of the seaside. It was simple but did not lose the elegance of modern times. It was modern, but had a trace of the tranquility of a small town from 100 years ago. As soon as they got out of the car, whether it was the tour guide or the tourists, they couldn't help but be fascinated by the town in front of them. They excitedly took out their phones and kept taking pictures of their surroundings. Perhaps to them, the houses and the like over there were very good places to take pictures. Seeing them like this, Delia, who was originally a little worried, felt relieved. It seemed that they liked this place very much. "Hey, handsome, are you from Huaxia?" Just as Delia and the others were about to take a break, among the tourists, a few women had already walked up to Jiang Hai and asked him with a smile. Obviously, these people had some interest in Jiang Hai after hearing Delia's introduction of Jiang Hai in the car. Looking at these women walking over, Jiang Hai smiled and replied indifferently, "Oh yes, I'm from Bingcheng." "Wow, Bingcheng? I've heard of it. The winter there is beautiful." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, a woman took the initiative to come over and asked Jiang Hai with a smile. But looking at her slightly flirtatious face, Jiang Hai took a step back. Chapter 470. Question. Why did this woman always have a fragrant smell on her body? Answer. Because she had put on too much makeup. The smell had been pickled. Jiang Hai didn't know if this woman had been pickled thoroughly, but the smell on her body was indeed very strong. Jiang Hai's physical fitness was now twice that of an ordinary person, and his sense of smell was also twice the limit of an ordinary person. As soon as the smell came over, it went into his nose. To be honest, he couldn't stand it. Stepping back was also his subconscious action. But as soon as he stepped back, he felt that it wasn't very good, so he immediately changed the topic. "Okay, I see that everyone is stretching. Let's go back to where we live first." After saying that, Jiang Hai waved his hand first, motioning for everyone to follow him, and walked toward the villa. The people in the distance heard Jiang Hai's words and followed Jiang Hai. Naturally, their phones kept flashing along the way. "Hee, you're in for it this time. Do you think everyone is like that idiot Zhao Lao-san? He floated over when you glanced at him. He's a billionaire with billions of dollars. What kind of woman hasn't he seen before? You'd better watch this, sister." On the other side, the women who had surrounded Jiang Hai couldn't help but tease the woman who had just leaned over. To be honest, the woman who had leaned over just now wasn't bad looking. If it was a perfect score of 100, she could be given 80 points, which was slightly worse than Feng Yunchen. She wasn't old either, but Jiang Hai had no interest in her. I don't believe that there's a cat in this world that doesn't steal fish. Watch me use my seduction technique to take him down in a while." Looking at Jiang Hai's back in front of her, it was obvious that this woman wouldn't give up so easily. Hearing her words, The others laughed, then picked up their luggage, and walked to the other side of the road. When these people walked on the road of the town, many residents of the town took the initiative to stop what they were doing and looked at these people in front of them with a smile. For them, these people were the gods of wealth, who came to give them money. Perhaps feeling that these people were staring at them, the people in the tour group also felt a little embarrassed, so they walked quickly and didn't take photos. Soon, they came to Zhanghai's row of seaside villas. As soon as they arrived here, everyone here couldn't help but exclaim, and then the flashes really came one after another. "We'll stay here tonight?" Pointing to the villas in front of him, Wu Shan said with some excitement. "Yes, you'll stay here tonight. There are 4 villas. Each villa has a dedicated cleaner. Of course, if anything is damaged, you will have to compensate according to the price. There are 8 rooms in each villa, and each room has 2 beds. I think it should be enough for you." Hearing Wu Shan's words, Jiang Hai also introduced. And after hearing Jiang Hai say that they will stay in such villas tonight, these people in the tour group were also excited. They walked directly into the villa and looked around. They had to admit that the villas that Jiang Hai invested money to build are very good. At least the decoration level is not worse than the workers' villas in his manor, or even better. The whole room is quite clean, making people have a good impression at a glance. Each villa has 8 rooms, and 4 villas have a total of 32 rooms. It is not a problem for 47 people to live in it. Among them, some women who are inconvenient, some who are not used to living with others, and some leaders have their own separate rooms. Some families, and some are not very important employees of state-owned enterprises. There is nothing wrong with 2 people living in one room. After confirming who will live with whom, everyone quickly ran into their favorite rooms. You know, Jiang Hai's villas have different themes, and they also want to have a good experience. Even Wu Shan and his 2 assistant tour guides, in fact mainly interpreters, ran in. When Jiang Hai got off the bus, he also heard that the 2 assistant tour guides, the man is called Zheng Fang, and the woman is called Yang Song. They are very good tour guides in China, otherwise, they would not be sent here with ease. But it can be seen that these 2 people, who have seen the world, are quite satisfied with Jiang Hai's place. They are not slower than these tourists. "Well, handsome Jiang, do you want to come up and sit? Let's play fight the landlord." But most people ran fast to grab a room, and some people's attention is not on the room, but on the people. For example, the woman next to Jiang Hai at this time. This woman looks 26 or 27 years old. She can sneak into a state-owned enterprise at this age. It seems that she has a lot of means. She is good-looking with wavy hair and a sharp chin. It is unknown whether she has undergone surgery, but it seems that she has the chance to stab people to death. Her figure is also quite good. Just now, she has already told a girl that they will live together. Now that almost everyone has left, she comes over and says to Jiang Hai, "You must be very tired. Have a good rest. In the evening, there will be a party in the square to welcome you. I want to go and take a look first." Hearing the woman's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but laugh. Jiang Hai couldn't help but laugh when he heard the woman's words. Although recently, it seems that he has not touched a woman for a long time. After all, it has been more than a month since he returned from China. But he still maintained his rationality. He knows that if he agrees, after going in cough cough, Jiang Hai doesn't care about taking advantage of some. Jiang Hai has taken advantage of many times before, but he knows that these women are not for him, but for his money. These plasters, if they stick to him and tear off, he will lose a layer of skin. Although he is not a good person, he will not take advantage of them. Hearing Jiang Hai's refusal, the 2 women here did not continue to pester him. Instead, after stuffing a note in Jiang Hai's hand, they smiled and took their luggage into the house. Indeed, as Jiang Hai said, they are also very tired. Of course, if Jiang Hai really goes into the house with them, the feeling of exhaustion is not important. "Jiang Hai, why are they so open? Didn't they say that Huaxia women are very conservative?" Seeing everyone walk in, Jiang Hai also wiped his sweat. At this moment, Delia directly rushed over and held Jiang Hai's arm and said with a smile, "Oh, you still have the nerve to talk about others? You directly pounced on me." Rolling his eyes at Delia, Jiang Hai pulled her hand away. We are different. We know each other. Since we are friends, then when a friend needs help, it is inevitable to help solve the problem of impulsiveness. Just like you today, you helped me a lot. How about we go back to the car and rest for a while? Seeing Jiang Hai pull her hand away, Delia did not care. She took the initiative again. Oh no, she took the initiative to come closer. She blinked her big eyes and looked at Jiang Hai. Looking at Jiang Hai's eyes, he found that this girl is really well developed. From top to bottom, a huge crack is clearly visible. But soon, Jiang Hai dispelled the thought in his mind. What a joke, he is not going to touch this Delia. If something happens, then Jiang Hai will have to bear the consequences. He doesn't want old George to come to his door with a shotgun and block him. Hee, you should just forget about it. I'm going to see how the preparations for the party are going. Pulling out his arm again, Jiang Hai smiled awkwardly, then put on his shield, and went to the square not far from the town. After arriving at the square, he found that Mayor Wallace was personally supervising there at this time. The party in this square naturally did not require a bonfire. A huge fire had been set up. Outside the bonfire there were many food stalls. The food on these stalls was all free. The most common was barbecue, such as grilled fish, grilled steak, grilled lobster, all kinds of shellfish, prawns, and crabs. In addition, there were also Western and Mexican food. But what surprised Jiang Hai the most was that the people who cooked these were the people who opened restaurants in the town. This made Jiang Hai a little puzzled. The food here was free. Jiang Hai thought that they found ordinary people in the town to cook. Why did these chefs come over? Hey Jiang Hai! Seeing Jiang Hai coming over, many people smiled and shouted. The closest person to him was the owner of the Italian restaurant that Jiang Hai used to go to. He waved at Jiang Hai. Hey, why are you here? Isn't the food tonight free? Walking to the side of the man, Jiang Hai asked with some puzzlement. He was indeed a little confused. What are these people doing here? Are they not doing business? These are all our requests. This is the best advertisement. How much do these ingredients cost in total? It's impossible for them to only eat one meal in our town. If they eat well, they will come to our store to eat in the future. At that time, it's time to make money. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the big man here also whispered. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai was also happy. This is indeed a good time to advertise. It seems that the town hall also saw this point and hit it off with these people. It seems that these people have been prepared for a long time. Looking at the ingredients, beer, and drinks that have been prepared, Jiang Hai, who was not very lively, was looking forward to tonight's party. Of course, he was most looking forward to these delicious food. In order to please the first group of Chinese tourists, these shops prepared a lot of improved food, which really made Jiang Hai hungry. Chapter 471. As night fell and the flames rose in the square, the tourists slowly walked over under Delia's guidance. When they saw the prepared venue, they couldn't help but cheer. Naturally, as they cheered, the flashes on their phones were also flashing. Originally, taking pictures was more for the sake of keeping memories of that time. However, people were taking pictures now to let all their friends know that they had gone out to play. Especially these people, who had come to the United States to play. The United States was comparable to Europe. It would be a waste if they didn't take more pictures to show off. After taking pictures of the flames, Mayor Wallace also said a few words. It was nothing more than welcoming everyone to Winthrop. Unlike the opening ceremonies in China, Americans didn't like to waste too much time on these ceremonies. Therefore, after less than 3 minutes, Mayor Wallace announced the start of the party and asked everyone to go and eat. After hearing Mayor Wallace's order, the hungry crowd turned their eyes to the surrounding food. When they saw it, their eyes couldn't help but light up. At the same time, their phones lit up as well. Is this steak? Oh my God, it's so delicious. It's so big and tender. It's so delicious. This is lobster. It's so big. It must be more than 1 kilogram. Are these all free? There are big lobsters and crabs here. Oh my God, such big fish. Are they all free? Looking at the ingredients here, the tourists went crazy. Everyone wanted to take advantage of the situation. This had nothing to do with money. The dinner that Winthrop prepared for them was really amazing. The seafood industry in Winthrop was gradually withering and wasn't as profitable as before. The number of lobsters and fish had decreased significantly. However, it wasn't as obvious as the decline. At least, the amount of food for the people in this town could still be maintained. Naturally, the food for these people wouldn't be bad. Since it was the first batch of visitors, the Winthrop Town Hall was very careful about the ingredients used for tonight's party. Although the ingredients were not the best, as Jianghai had the best, they were still of high quality. And it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that the higher-level products here were the finest products in the country. For example, the roast beef here was the standard grade that the town hall required. This type of beef was sold for $8 a pound in the local supermarkets. Of course, it was cheaper in the restaurants. That was about $6 a pound, which was about 36 yuan. In China, this kind of beef could only be eaten in steakhouses. For example, the best and most expensive beef sold in supermarkets in China, such as cucumber strips, were sold for more than 40 yuan a pound. Here, it was only commercially available and was of a lower level. This kind of beef could only be eaten in steakhouses in China. After taking the first sip, the eyes of those who liked beer lit up. Even those who liked white wine couldn't help but drink a few cups. They had to admit that this thing tasted much better than ordinary wine. "Miss George, you are letting us eat these for free? Aren't you afraid of losing money?" An hour before the party started, it was time to eat. Half an hour later, it was time to drink. After an hour and a half, everyone was having fun. They were eating and drinking beer. It was really fun. As a tour guide, Delia was naturally stationed here. When they saw Delia, many tourists who knew English took the initiative to talk to her. Of course, most of the tourists were young men. One of them was the one who was talking to her now. "Oh, these things are provided by the merchants. After all, you're here to play for 5 days. And we're only in charge of dinner for 1 day. This is also a form of promotion. If you feel that the food is good, you can go to their stores to eat." Delia, who was eating a drumstick, couldn't help but smile when she heard this person's words. Compared to lobsters, Delia, who was born and raised in Winthrop, was more interested in chicken. After all, lobsters were valuable now, but they were worthless in the past. In the earliest days, when Europeans immigrated to the United States, lobsters were swept up by the waves and thrown into piles on the beach. However, they did not dare to eat them at that time. A few years ago, lobsters were not as valuable as they were in the past, but lobsters were indeed worthless. In American, lobsters were called poor people's chicken. It meant that only the poor who could not afford to eat chicken would eat lobsters. Therefore, when Delia and the rest were young, they did not lack lobsters and were tired of eating them. Even if they were worth some money now, they were worthless in Winthrop. They could eat them whenever they wanted. There was no need for them to eat them. Even so, they are losing out too much. We have to eat a lot tonight. At this time, another man who was chewing lobster meat said with a smile, "The meat of lobster is somewhat like the meat of prawns, but it is much firmer than prawns. The meat inside is like a tendon. It tastes particularly fresh, but it is very hard and chewy. It's okay. These things are not very expensive here." Hearing this man's words, Delia also said with a smile, "Ah, this beef, this lobster, they are not small here." Hearing Delia say that these things are not expensive, many people sighed. But not expensive does not mean that they are cheap. Looking at the food in their hands, many people sighed. It's okay, you have to see where it is compared. If it is in a small town, the food you are eating now is still very good. But if it is compared to Jianghai's, it is far worse. Hearing these people's words, Delia also narrowed her eyes and smiled. Jianghai. Chapter 472. I have to admit that your improvements are really good, but the materials are a little worse. After eating a skewer of barbecue, Jianghai smiled and said to old Tony next to him. Hearing his words, old Tony also smiled and took a big sip of beer. Do you think everyone can afford to eat your beef? It's really easy to talk. After hearing Jianghai's words, The macho man who was barbecuing next to old Tony couldn't help but look at him contemptuously. Of course, his hands were not slow to turn over the skewers on the stove. For today's party, these businesses in the town had actually been preparing for 2 months. Other things were easy to deal with, such as materials, utensils, and so on. They have all these, but this method needs to be considered. Originally, they also thought that the most likely people to come were some domestic tourists like Mayor Wallace. If it's domestic tourists, then they don't need to do much improvement. But 3 days ago, they were suddenly informed that domestic tourists would not come. And the ones who came were all Huaxia, which made them a little flustered. But fortunately, there were many Chinese people in Boston. Although Jiang Hai was the only one in Winthrop, there were many in Boston. So they specially went to the university town yesterday and inquired about the taste of Huaxia people before making it today. It has to be admitted that in order to make money, people really think of any way, especially in the aspect of making things. The tastes of Chinese and Americans were slightly different. Americans like to eat sour food, especially sour and sweet. Just look at the amount of ketchup they consumed every year, and you would know how much they liked to eat. Although many people in China like to eat sour and sweet food as well, many people like to eat sour and sweet food as well. For example, Jiang Hai likes to eat sour and sweet flavors. It was a child's taste, but this flavor was not mainstream. It was precisely because of this that these people had to improve the taste to make it salty and fresh. Of course, some sour and sweet were okay, but they needed to pay attention to the amount. They couldn't eat everything with ketchup. Americans really like to eat everything with ketchup. Not just French fries, fried chicken, steamed potatoes, carrots, cooked meat, and so on. They could all eat it with ketchup. He had to admit that it was amazing. Well, hello, I think we're about the same age, so we can just call you Jiang Hai. Just as Jiang Hai was talking and laughing with the people here, a few men came over. They looked at Jiang Hai and asked with a smile. Hearing their words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but stare blankly for a moment. He knew that these men weren't very happy with him. After all, he was a bit too much in the limelight. But it couldn't be so coincidental. Could it be that these people wanted to step on him? Were they crazy? Oh sure. After thinking for a moment, Jiang Hai nodded with a smile. No matter what these people wanted to do, he would deal with them as they came. Jiang Hai didn't care what they thought. If they really wanted to be melodramatic, then Jiang Hai wouldn't be polite. Hello Jiang Hai, my name is Zhou Wei. We can be considered as half of the same hometown. I'm from Liao province. Hearing that Jiang Hai was quite easy to talk to, the men here couldn't help but sit up. The man who just talked to Jiang Hai said with a smile, "Oh, then we can be considered as half of the same hometown." In China, the 3 northeastern provinces were regarded as a whole except for the people of the 3 northeastern provinces. In fact, this was understandable. After all, the 3 northeastern provinces had not been regarded as a place of residence by the Orthodox dynasty of Huaxia since ancient times. It was the place where nomads originated, such as Wuhan, Xianbei, Jurchen, and so on. It was not until the Manchurian Qing dynasty that it was incorporated into the territory of Huaxia, because it was the place where the Tatars rose. However, the Tatars had always been indifferent to the 3 northeastern provinces. This could also be seen from the Treaty of Nerchinsk they signed with Soviet Russia. It should be known that this was signed when the Manchurian Qing dynasty promoted the prosperity of pockmarked sweet potatoes. Otherwise, Lake Baikal would still be an inseparable part of China's territory. Later, the Manchurian Qing dynasty was finished, and the domestic warlords began to fight. The 3 northeastern provinces were also an independent country. Feng Jun had almost unified the whole country. Later, because Marshal Zhang didn't want to play anymore, he was killed by the Japanese when he went back. Later, the 3 northeastern provinces fell. It could be said that except for Chuang Guangdong, the 3 northeastern provinces basically didn't have much communication with the mainland. This was also the reason why the people of the 3 northeastern provinces always regarded the 3 northeastern provinces as a collective. I heard from the tour guide George over there that there are 20 kilograms of lobsters in your manor. After exchanging a few pleasantries, this person's eyes began to light up. And he said with a face full of anticipation. After all, after he sent the food he ate here back to his circle of friends in China, his bad friends in China had already begun to complain about it. They regretted that they didn't come together with a group. Just these food were enough for them to pay for the ticket price. If they could get some photos of eating 20 kilograms of lobsters and post them, oh my God, he couldn't imagine it. 20 kilograms? I have some, but not much, but there are a lot of 15 or 16 kilograms. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai froze for a moment, then shook his head and said to him. Hearing the first half of Jiang Hai's words, the man couldn't help but be a little disappointed, but when he heard the last sentence, he couldn't help but curse in his heart. Jiang Hai, this pretentious guy, he was a little caught off guard. 15 or 6 kilograms is fine. I know it's not very good to say this, but look, can you sell one to us cheaper? Looking at Jiang Hai, the man's eyes suddenly lit up, and he asked carefully with a shy face. Sell one to you? Sure. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be stunned for a moment, then he laughed. The things in his manner were to be sold, and it was fine to sell a lobster. Of course, the price wouldn't be as bad as in China. Hearing that Jiang Hai was willing to sell, these people couldn't help but clap their hands. As long as Jiang Hai was willing to sell, it would be good. But the price? After the excitement, the man who just talked to Jiang Hai hesitated and asked Jiang Hai. As you all know, lobsters are priced differently according to their sizes. Looking at the people in front of him, Jiang Hai also explained to them that lobsters were different in size and weight, and they were also very particular. Basically, they were divided into 3 levels, one for every half a pound. Those under 454 grams were called CHIX. Those between 454 and 681 grams were called quarters. Those between 681 and 908 grams were called selects. And those over 908 grams were called jambio. Those that lost one or both of their front paws were called cull, which was the least valuable. Of course, this was just the classification of the supermarket. For the average person, a pound of lobsters is half a kilogram, and those that weighed 4 kilograms were ordinary goods. The lowest price was $5 a pound, and it ranged from $20 a pound. In other words, the largest Boston lobster that was 60 centimeters and weighed 4 kilograms could be sold for about $160 if it was alive. However, there was basically no such thing as good quality, so a 4-kilogram, 2-foot-long Boston lobster could only be sold for about $120. If it had broken legs and claws, it could be sold for about $80. And if it was dead, it could be sold for about $70. If it was a supermarket special, a 4-kilogram, 2-foot-long lobster could only be sold for about $50. It was indeed very cheap. Of course, they couldn't buy it at this price, and Jiang Hai couldn't sell it to them at this price. Jiang Hai's lobsters were all raised with spiritual energy, and their meat was much better than ordinary lobsters. Therefore, it was not excessive for Jiang Hai to sell a 15-kilogram lobster for $3,000. $3,000 was equivalent to $100 per pound. Such a big lobster could be eaten for less than $20,000. It was a big bargain for them. If this lobster was in China, it would be a miracle if the hotel didn't charge you $50,000 or $80,000 for it. Chapter 473. Jiang Hai refused the invitation of several beauties to sit in their rooms. Jiang Hai ended the party at 10 o'clock in the evening and sent all the tourists back to the villa. Then he drove back to the manor. After all, he also drank a lot of wine. After Jiang Hai returned home, he took a simple bath and lay down on his jade bed to sleep. To be honest, Jiang Hai was not very comfortable when he slept on the jade bed at first, because this thing was really uncomfortable. In order to increase his contact area, Jiang Hai deliberately did not put a cushion on the bed. When he lay down, the soreness was simply unbelievable, especially when he slept on a jade pillow and a jade surface. It was really uncomfortable, but fortunately Jiang Hai had a big heart, and he got used to it these days. After taking a bath, Jiang Hai lay down on the bed and slept. After a night of silence, He got up early the next morning and went for a run as usual. When he came back, he found that Penny was there practicing boxing. "Hey, you're at home. I thought you weren't." Seeing Jiang Hai running back, Penny withdrew her boxing and said with some surprise, "Last night, they waited until Jiang Hai came back after 10 o'clock, but he didn't come back, so everyone went to sleep. We played until 10 o'clock last night, and then I came back after sending them back to the villa. I got home around 11 o'clock." Hearing her words, Jiang Hai also smiled and said slowly, he didn't know that Penny and the others had been waiting for him for a long time. "Oh, those people didn't cause trouble? I heard that tourists are particularly fond of causing trouble." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Penny smiled and came over. As she spoke, she looked at Jiang Hai. The trouble in her words was not the usual trouble, but something else. "Oh, this is the United States, more or less restrained." Looking at her meaningful look, Jiang Hai said a little awkwardly, "Indeed, there were a lot of women who indicated that he could play with them yesterday. In addition to the tour group, there was also Delia." Fortunately, Jiang Hai still had a lot of self-control. "TSK, I don't believe your nonsense." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Bernice rolled her eyes at him, then walked into the room while swaying her butt. Looking at her swaying as she walked, Jiang Hai couldn't help but laugh. Did he really have a face that could steal fish? Compared to those people in society, Jiang Hai should be able to control himself very well. There were so many women around him, but the only ones who had really slept with him were Feng Yunchen, Ai Xiaoxi, Aphrodite, and Selena Gomez. It seemed that Jiang Hai was very promiscuous, but he was actually quite pure. This thought just flashed in Jiang Hai's mind. Walking into the villa, he went to eat breakfast first. Since Little Ye could leave the house in the morning, Jiang Hai basically didn't let him make breakfast himself. He had to admit that Little Ye was a master, an absolute master in cooking. Not only did the dinner in the evening look good, but the breakfast was also good. Breakfast was naturally quite good. Just the porridge alone was enough to make more than a dozen kinds. Of course, this also had a lot to do with the rice that Jiang Hai brought back. Rice bought in the United States was expensive, and it wasn't a good thing. Especially Jiang Hai's favorite porridge with lean meat and century egg. It was quite delicious, and she could also make fried dough sticks, pancakes, wontons, and dumplings. Recently, Jiang Hai didn't have to drink cheddar soup or oatmeal every day. To be honest, he didn't like oatmeal. Jiang Hai ate like this every day, causing Delina and the others to eat Chinese food. At first, they weren't used to it, but after eating for a long time, it was very good. Although Chinese food was more oily than Western food, they didn't care about it. Eating things produced in Jiang Hai's manner, whether it was vegetables or meat, contained a trace of spiritual energy. Eating these things wouldn't do any harm, it would only bring benefits. For example, some fatty meat. Although Jiang Hai didn't eat it, if he ate it outside the manor, his cholesterol would be very high. But the fatty meat produced in Jiang Hai's manor would turn into energy after entering the body. Therefore, eating things produced in Jiang Hai's manor wouldn't make you sick. Your body would only get better. Because of this, Jiang Hai didn't care about what he ate. At first, Bernice paid attention to it, but now she didn't pay any attention to it. After eating breakfast, Jiang Hai returned to his room and lay on the bed to absorb the spiritual energy. Recently, more and more scales appeared on his body, so he needed to spend more time to absorb them. As for the tourists, they had already started playing. Before going to the party last night, Wu Shan had already told them about it. Because the town didn't have any cultural attractions, only the church and 2 small museums needed to be explained. Therefore, the 3 tour guides played a role of communication and translation. If they wanted to do something, they would directly ask each other. Then the tour guides would arrange a car for them to go out and play. The things that could be played in the town also made these people somewhat dazzled. Last night at the party, these people also discussed with each other where to play today. Today there were 3 places that they chose the most: the horse farm, the gun shop, and the public bath. It wasn't difficult to ride a horse in the country, but the cost of riding a horse wasn't low. Here they could ride as they wished. Naturally, a lot of people wanted to ride a horse. And guns, No matter what time it was, were men's favorite. Even Jiang Hai went to the gun shop when he first came to the United States. As for the women, they preferred to go to the beach. It was already the end of July, and the sea was very warm. It was a good time to swim in the sea. Of course, they dared to go to other places. For example, the women also wanted to stroll around the commercial street here. Some people who liked culture wanted to see the church and the 2 museums. Some people who liked nature wanted to see the private manor. Almost everyone wanted to go to the sea. The middle-aged and old people wanted to go fishing, especially when they heard that the fish here would belong to them after they finished fishing. Most importantly, the fish here were especially good to catch and were especially big. This made them even more tempted. Originally, when they came here, they were still thinking that there was nothing fun to do in this small town for 5 days. On the plane, they had already discussed that when they arrived here, if it wasn't fun here, they would go to the United States. After 3 days, they would ask the tour guide to take them to Boston or New York. Those places were much more famous. But when they arrived here, they found that they were really naive. Let alone 5 days, even half a month would be full of fun. At least there were a lot of things. They weren't going to just play once. Early this morning, these people made an appointment to go to the horse farm together. After playing in the horse farm for the whole morning, they ate delicious Mexican food in the Mexican restaurant near the horse farm at noon. These Chinese people spent a lot of money, which made the owner of the restaurant very happy. One had to know that the amount of food these people ate for lunch today was already comparable to his weekly income in the past. Of course, the things he gave were clearly priced. He would never cheat the tourists. If he dared to cheat, Jiang Hai and Mayor Wallace wouldn't let him go. Also, he made money, so these tourists ate very happily. It was impossible to eat such authentic Mexican food in China, especially for people who liked to eat spicy food. Their eyes were shining. Mexican chili was actually the most delicious because it was not only spicy, but also had a hint of sweetness. It was spicy and sweet, but it wasn't dry or hot. It was especially good to eat, especially when paired with a glass of rum. Even a god wouldn't exchange it for it. After eating the delicious Mexican food, some people who didn't have enough riding continued to go back to the horse farm. But most of the men went to the gun shop, and the women went to the public bathhouse to bask in the sun and enjoy the sea breeze. When the men walked into the gun shop, their eyes were fixed. The phones in their hands were flashing nonstop. There were very few men who didn't like cars and guns. Compared to guns, the current economic conditions in the country allowed for cars, especially those who came here to play. These people could say that it wasn't too troublesome to buy a car that cost more than 100,000 yuan. Chapter 474. Did you see it? I hit 7 10-point shots just now. 7. If it weren't for the bad recruitment system of the imperial court, I might have already become a sharpshooter in our army. After the group of people returned to the parking lot by car, they walked in the direction of the villa in a mighty manner. But when they left, they naturally bragged to each other. Okay, stop bragging. How many bullets did you shoot? I didn't look carefully, but you used at least 15 magazines. 15 magazines to hit 7 10-point shots. You don't feel embarrassed. I only used 10 magazines to hit 5 10-point shots. I'm much better than you. Hearing this person's words, a person next to him immediately said disdainfully, Phew, you really have the guts to say that. Weren't you able to defeat 10 of them? Because you were playing with the MG42 for an hour at the start, and your hands were numb from the shock? I said that the things you chose were wrong. Look, when you chose them, the waiter in the shop opposite was scared silly. But unfortunately, before this person finished speaking, he was interrupted by another person. That person really didn't have a single bullet left. Alright, stop bragging. If it were up to me, none of you would be able to do it. We have to look at our director Lu's skills. After all, he used to be a soldier. That pistol, he shoots wherever he points. Pa, 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 pa. I have never seen Director Lu miss the target before. Looking at the lively few people here, at this time, there would always be a henchman standing up and flattering the leader. Sigh. Young people are really too eager for quick success and instant benefits. Shooting is like tasting wine, it can't be rushed. And the director, surnamed Liu, after hearing someone mention him, couldn't help but give that person a look of appreciation. Then he talked about his past when he was a soldier and how to shoot. Obviously, these young people didn't want to listen to this, but they didn't dare to interrupt the leader's speech, so they could only listen there. At the same time, they were also ridiculing the henchmen in their hearts. They came out to play, but they didn't forget to teach them a lesson. Just as these people were about to walk to the villa, a car they were very familiar with slowly drove over from a distance. The tourists were all familiar with this car. It was War Shield, although they had only learned of this name the day before. But it didn't prevent them from recognizing this car logo, and they can brag about it when they go back in the future. After all, this car is worth 20 million yuan. Hey, Xiao Jiang is here. I haven't seen him all day. After seeing the car, Director Liu, who was talking, said to the people around him, as if he was really familiar with Jiang Hai. Anyway, other people couldn't say anything about him. Yes, I haven't seen him for the whole day. As soon as they heard the director's words, someone naturally answered. However, as soon as his voice fell, he saw Jiang Hai's car had already stopped by the roadside in the distance. Jiang Hai waved at them and jumped out of the car. At the same time, he took out a large bag from the back seat. Hi Xiaojiang. I haven't seen you all day. What are you doing here? Seeing Jiang Hai walking over with a bag, Director Liu couldn't help but welcome him with a smile. His attitude towards Jiang Hai was very good now, because he liked this place very much. Oh, Director Liu, I'm here to deliver some things. Hey, these are the things you want. Hearing this fat man's words, Jiang Hai also smiled. Yesterday, Wu Shan had already introduced the important guests in this tour group to Jiang Hai. Among them was Director Liu. Jiang Hai opened a business here, so there was no need to make things difficult for him. So he called him. Jiang Hai also responded with a smile. As for whether he was willing to get close to him or not, he was not a woman, so Jiang Hai didn't care. Jiang Hai saw the 6 people from yesterday in the crowd, so he handed the bag over to them. Seeing the bag handed over by Jiang Hai, the 6 people were a little confused at first, but they instantly understood what was inside the bag. After taking the bag, they looked inside. Sure enough, a greenish-brown behemoth was lying in the bag at this time, looking at them with its fangs and claws. As soon as they saw their shocked eyes, many people nearby came over. Oh my God, is this a lobster? This is a lobster. At first glance, someone had already exclaimed, how is this a lobster? This is a lobster king. I once saw one in XX seafood restaurant. It seems to be about the same size as this one. It's the treasure of their restaurant. It only costs 100,000 yuan. Oh my God, you're rich. You can actually afford to eat this thing. When a person next to him saw this lobster, he couldn't help but be shocked and said slowly. Hearing his words, the others looked at this guy with a face of surprise. Even Director Liu couldn't help but swallow a mouthful of saliva. To be honest, after being the main cadre of a state-owned enterprise for so many years, when he was able to eat such a big lobster back then, he wasn't qualified to eat it. Now that he was qualified to eat it, but the imperial court didn't allow it. A lobster that costs 100,000 yuan. Just thinking about it made him salivate. It's not that expensive. It's 18,000 yuan for one. This is produced in Jiang Hai's manor. Yesterday, we heard from tour guide George that Jiang Hai's manor has more than 20 kilograms of lobsters, but we can't afford to eat more than 20 kilograms. So the 6 of us combined, and each of us took $500 to buy this one. By the way, Jiang Hai, how heavy is this lobster? Seeing everyone looking at them with envy and jealousy, the 6 people's vanity was greatly satisfied. However, the way Director Qi looked at them made them panic. It seemed that more people would have to eat this lobster tonight. This is 16 kilograms. The extra kilogram is my gift to you. In addition to the lobster, there are some sea cucumbers and abalones. They're all pretty good. You should have a kitchen in your villa, so you can make some simple dishes. If you want to make something fancy, go to the restaurant over there. Whether it's an Italian restaurant, a Boston restaurant, or a French restaurant, they all know how to make this thing. The processing fee should be less than $20. Jiang Hai smiled when he heard his words. He didn't care if these people could eat this thing or not. His main goal was to make money. When they heard Jiang Hai say that there were sea cucumbers and abalones inside, the 6 people looked at each other. One of them was stronger and directly lifted the lobster out. As soon as he lifted it out, he saw a lot of northern polar sea cucumbers and fist-sized abalones. What the F***, CK? Jiang Hai, you're too generous. You want 3 abalones? Looking at the abalones below, some people who knew their stuff had already cried out. Abalones had always been extremely precious in China. Now that they were in Jiang Hai, he was directly giving them away. They should all have 2 abalones. The ones with 3 abalones are still babies to me, so I don't usually fish them out. As for the sea cucumbers, they're all grown up. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also laughed. If he didn't pretend now, when would he? Oh my god, Jiang Hai, are you selling these abalones and sea cucumbers? Buying lobster was a little expensive. Although it was 4 to 5 times cheaper than in China, it wasn't something that ordinary people could afford. Not everyone was willing to spend $3,000 to eat a big lobster. However, according to Jiang Hai, abalones and sea cucumbers weren't anything rare here, so they shouldn't be too expensive. Looking at the eager gazes in front of him, Jiang Hai calculated and said to them, "Sea cucumbers, this kind of Arctic sea cucumber is fresh. I'll give you 1 kilogram. $100. For this kind of abalones, $150 per kilogram." The best quality sea cucumbers were naturally very expensive. Jiang Hai had the best quality sea cucumbers. If they were dried and brought back to China to sell, it wouldn't be excessive for Jiang Hai to sell them for $6,500 in a 300-gram gift box. However, since they were fresh here, according to the sun-dried rate of 3 kilograms to 1 kilogram, Jiang Hai could sell them for $100. After all, this was already 1,000 grams. He was selling them for 1 kilogram, not 1 kilogram. $100 was equivalent to $600. For such a big sea cucumber, $600 per kilogram was an insane profit. As for the abalones, the best 2-headed abalones in Africa, they were sold for $2,500 per kilogram. Of course, the so-called abalones were different from the ordinary ones. The so-called abalones were a few hundred grams per kilogram, which was more than 600 grams per kilogram. It was different from the ordinary ones, which were 500 grams per kilogram. However, even if they were sold for $4,000 per kilogram, Jiang Hai was selling them for $150 per kilogram, which was about $900 per kilogram. This was at least 4 times the price. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, these people were tempted. Looking at their expressions, Jiang Hai found some work for AI Dehua and the others, so that his fish farm could also generate some income. After all, the United States didn't eat sea cucumbers or abalones here. It was also very troublesome for Jiang Hai to sell these things in China. Not only do they need to be dried, but they also need to be responsible for the sales. And most importantly, Jiang Hai didn't deliberately raise these things. So the quantity was not very big. It was so big that he needed to find a place to sell them. Since the quantity was not very big, other than eating it himself, it was also a good choice to sell it to tourists. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, all these people were tempted. Looking at their expressions, Jiang Hai smiled. How to generate income from tourism? How much money can he earn from renting houses? Of course, he had to rely on selling things. However, some places sold fake goods or expensive goods. Winthrop wouldn't do that. But they felt that it was very suitable for Jiang Hai to sell to tourists. Indeed, if you travel all over the country, even the coastal areas, it would not be cheaper than Jiang Hai's place. For foodies, Jiang Hai's place was the real heaven. It was a paradise on earth. Well, a few of us are here to buy a lobster. Can you deliver it to us tomorrow? Finally, after these people discussed for a long time, there was the first group of people who wanted to eat the lobster. These people were not like the 6 people who wanted to eat the lobster alone. This time there were 10 of them. $3,000, $300 per person. That's $1,800. It was very suitable to eat such a big lobster. No problem. I'll sell it to you for $3,000 too. Hearing this person's words, Jiang Hai also smiled. This was all real money, and there was no tax on it. Then I'll buy 1 kilogram of abalone. I'll buy 2 kilograms of sea cucumber. We'll buy 2 lobsters. Can you give us some abalone and sea cucumber? Since the first person wanted the lobster, the rest of the people didn't hesitate. They immediately rushed up and started to buy. Chapter 475. Jiang, you called me. Looking at Jiang Hai, who was sitting in the living room and watching TV, Edward Anderson walked in. To be honest, he was under a lot of pressure now. Of course, this pressure was not given to him by Jiang Hai, nor was it given to him by his subordinates. It was given to him by himself. No matter what kind of force it was, as long as it was divided into 2 parts, the battle between the sea and the land would always be staged. It was the same for Jiang Hai. Usually if one side needed help, everyone would go and help. However, cowboys and sailors would always unconsciously start to compare themselves with each other. Salary was another matter. Because Jiang Hai's salary was quite high, at least much higher than that of ordinary sailors and cowboys. It was a competition of rewards, or a question of which side was more profitable. Logically speaking, the sea was definitely more profitable than the land, because the area of the sea was larger. Of course, this was referring to Jiang Hai's manor. The area of the sea field was more than 10 times the area of the land, so it could not be said that the money earned was 10 times more than the land. But it was at least 2 or 3 times more than the land. Originally, Edward Anderson did not care too much about this, because he knew that no matter what he raised, as long as he raised it, it should be more profitable than raising cattle. For example, raising codfish in such a large sea field would not be enough to feed 10 million codfish. A pound of codfish was 80 cents, and 1 codfish was 2 pounds. 10 million codfish would be 20 million pounds, which would be $16 million a year. After deducting the cost of labor and feed, it would be $12 million. After paying taxes, at least there would be a pure profit of about $7 million. How many cows could one raise in an ordinary manner to earn $7 million? When you buy a cow, it costs $4,000, and when you sell it, it costs $5,000. After deducting the cost of labor, feed, and transfer, you can earn about $100 per cow. 10,000 cows would be 1 million, and 70,000 cows would be 7 million. Could Jiang Hai's manor raise 70,000 cows? Therefore, according to common sense, fishing was definitely more profitable than doing it on land. But who knew that Jiang Hai was so awesome? 20,000 fish were worth 3 billion. This time, all the pressure was on Edward Anderson. He was afraid that Jiang Hai would stop raising fish after seeing the profits on land. Fortunately, Jiang Hai did not seem to have that intention. This time, he had specially imported a type of rockfish from China, called the big yellow rockfish. In his opinion, this type of fish was no different from the American red rockfish. It tasted similar, but for some reason, this type of fish could be sold for $200 per kilogram in Huaxia. He could only say that the Huaxia people were too rich. $200 for this? After eating it, one could ascend to immortality. But no matter what, he was still doing his best. He was also enduring it now. When this batch of fish came out, he wouldn't be able to endure it anymore. But now that he looked at Jiang Hai, he still felt a little guilty. Hey Uncle Edward, come, this is the order. Catch them for me before 3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. Seeing Edward Anderson coming over, Jiang Hai pulled him to the sofa, and then took out a handwritten order. You have an order? Upon hearing Jiang Hai's words, Uncle Edward couldn't help but be stunned. Although it's a good thing to have orders, the fish in the fishery haven't grown up yet. Why would he take orders now? Is he going to sell fry? But when he saw the things on it, he couldn't help but frown, because what was written on it had nothing to do with fish. 4 lobsters more than 15 kilograms, 17 kilograms of abalones, 20 kilograms of sea cucumbers. Jiang, what do you want so many of these things for? Looking at these things in front of him, Edward Anderson couldn't help but ask with some doubts. These are for sale. Don't you know that there is a tour group in town? These are all ordered by them. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but smile. These were all ordered by his gods of fortune. Naturally, he would do his best to fulfill them. Oh, so that's the case, but they didn't order a lot. How much can they sell for? Looking at Jiang Hai, Edward Anderson scratched his head. He really didn't see how valuable these things were. How much can they sell for? Hee, just these 4 lobsters. I sold them for $12,000. These 17 kilograms of abalones, $2,550. And these 20 kilograms of sea cucumbers, $2,000. Jiang Hai pointed at the things on the list and said with a smile, "What? These things are so expensive?" Normally, Americans didn't eat sea cucumbers and abalones. Now that he heard that Jiang Hai was about to sell them for $5,000, and it was only a small amount, Ai Dehua was a little shocked. As for the price of lobsters, he was too lazy to complain. Lobsters above 15 kilograms are really rare here. However, it's not that no one has ever caught such a big lobster. Generally speaking, lobsters of this size are sold to fishermen for about $1,000. This time, Jiang Hai directly doubled the price and sold them. It's really shocking. That's because he didn't know that Jiang Hai doubled the price, which is 4 times cheaper than in China, so he couldn't help but be tempted. This is just the first batch. As long as we sell our lobsters, abalones, and sea cucumbers, I believe that there will be more and more domestic tour groups in the future. Now there are only 47 people. If there are 470 people, 4,700 people, or even 47,000 people, the price will increase by 100 times. Of this, Jiang Hai still has to share more than $1,000. Don't forget that he is the one who invested the money. The third place to make money was the commercial street. Of course, this does not refer to the entire commercial street. If the commercial street made all the money, it would be much more than the horse farm and the shooting range. After 4 days of fun, on the 5th day, the tourists consciously went to buy souvenirs on their own. However, when they saw the American ginseng that was more than 10 years old, and the pure maple syrup, that was only a few dollars, the souvenirs that were handmade were only a few dollars, and the ginseng that was more than 10 years old only cost a few $100s. When the clothes and food made in the United States were very cheap, a buying frenzy broke out among the tourists. In one day, the commercial street made more than $40,000. After deducting labor, water, electricity, and the original purchase price, each shop made more than $1,000. Some of the townsfolk who originally did not trust Huaxia tourism cheered at this moment. As for the townsfolk who did not join in, they were pounding their feet and stomping their feet. After all, they had lost a chance to make money. Fortunately, it was not too late. Immediately, many people racked their brains to see what the town still lacked. Then they found a business opportunity. That is, there are no hotels in the town. It is understandable. Originally, there were no outsiders in the town, so there was only a very shabby small hotel. But now in the town, except for Jiang Hai's villa area, there are not many hotels to stay in, so these townspeople's homes became the only choice. But even if they remembered, it was too late for the first batch. They would have to wait for the second batch. No one thought that the second batch of construction would come so soon after the first Winthrop construction. But at this moment, Jiang Hai had nothing to do with this, because he was already preparing to upgrade before these people left. Chapter 476. Goodbye. Goodbye, I'll be back. Standing in front of the bus, Director Liu waved his hand vigorously. Hearing his words, Director Liu was very excited. He didn't know if Delia and Mayor Wallace, who came to send them off, understood or not. After greeting each other for a long time, everyone got on the bus and left Winthrop. What, you still don't want to leave? Back in the bus, as soon as Director Chi sat down, the person sitting next to him smiled and said. Hearing this person's words, Director Liu sighed. We've gone out to have fun so many times. Every time, we were as tired as a dead dog. In the end, we just took some photos. When we were about to leave, we didn't feel any nostalgia. But this time I really liked it here. The pace of life here is slow, and there are many things to play with. The things are good. Sai, to be honest, I really don't want to leave. Hearing his companion's words, Director Lu sighed. Suddenly, he felt that coming here to play this time was really the right choice. Haha, if you don't want to leave, you can come back next time. Hearing his old companion's words, the person here also laughed and said, I really want to come back. Do you think we can move here after we retire? Looking back at the town that was getting farther and farther away, Director Lu suddenly said to the person next to him, if this is a small town in the country, then it doesn't matter if we come here. But the problem is that this is a foreign country, so this is destined to be impossible. Hearing his companion's words, Director Lu couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. Then he laughed. He knew that his companion was right. This is the United States. It's not a place where you can settle down after you retire. If you want to settle down in the United States, you must get a green card. You can choose not to become a citizen of the United States, like Jiang Hai, but a green card is necessary. There are only 3 possibilities for long-term residence in the United States. One is a work visa, but this requires a visa and taxes. They are retired, so it is impossible for them to pay taxes in the United States. The second method is technical immigration. If there are some technologies that the U.S. needs, they will be given certain technological benefits and undergo technical immigration. However, the requirements for skilled immigrants in China were very strict. Generally speaking, those who wanted skilled immigrants would go straight to university in the United States. After graduating from university, they would find a job here and apply for a work visa. Then, when they had a certain level of ability, they would go through skilled immigrants and directly move over from China. It was very rare for China to let people go, and Director Lu and the rest did not have a chance. The third option was to invest in immigrants. This was the simplest option, but there was a problem. To be honest, this place was really fun. Even if he has traveled extensively for so many years, he has nothing to say about this place. We will definitely come back. Hearing Wu Shan say so, Director Lu in the front couldn't help but say with a smile, since there is no way to settle here, it seems to be a good choice to always come here. Hearing Director Lu's words, all the people in the car laughed. However, a seed of hope had already sprouted in their hearts. Winthrop, the paradise in their eyes, was a paradise. They would definitely come back in the future. By the way, when we left, I didn't see Jiang Hai. At this moment, a young man suddenly said, they have some understanding of Jiang Hai these days. After all, they bought a lot of seafood from Jiang Hai. And Jiang Hai is also very generous. Not only does he often give them some weight, but he also gives them things. Lobsters, abalones, sea cucumbers. These things can't be eaten every day, but sometimes Jiang Hai gives them Arctic shrimp and crabs. They are very satisfied. The taste is quite good, much better than what they can buy in China. Now when they mention Jiang Hai, these people feel that their saliva secretion in their mouths is accelerated. He really has too much delicious food. I didn't see him yesterday. I heard from the big man who sent us that Jiang Hai seems to have gone out yesterday and will not be back for a while. Hearing this person's words, a person who is closer to Jiang Hai next to him also said with a smile. Hearing his words at this time, other people also began to talk, but they are not concerned about what Jiang Hai is going to do. But Jiang Hai's seafood is really delicious. Unfortunately, even if it is 5 or 6 times cheaper than in China, they still can't afford it. After all, those seafood are not something that ordinary people can afford. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.